Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back for something a little bit different. Today we are engaged in some anti-boomer action. I don't know how to say that with a German accent, so I can't justify spelling it with the K. But the primary target for our anti-boomer crusade shall be none other than sort of a mutual to all of us and a mutual to none of us, the academic agent. And with me, I am joined by the other problem children whom AA has deemed unworthy of his time, Pomen, Ray, and Volt. And I don't know, what's up, guys? How's it hanging?
Shalom. Quite good, quite good.
Excellent. Pomen returning from his crusade to the once Byzantine capital. How was that?
It was very Greek. No, I was kidding. No, but we spent nearly 2 days walking around, surely seeing mosques as well. We saw so many churches. It's like, am I here for the Islamic parts of Istanbul, or am I literally here for Byzantium? And it felt like I was there for Byzantium, so which was
God willing.
fascinating in a way. In a way, it was very. Sometimes I wonder, did the guy wanted us to go Dios Volts, because that's what I felt.
Well, did you have a Muslim-like guy, or was he like Pontic or something?
The guy was Swedish, but his PhD student. Actually, I don't know if he's a doctor or PhD student. But his history, like his focus is Byzantium, like Greek history. So worked perfectly. The reason why we walked around with him a lot, we also had 10 Danish priests with us, so we couldn't go to very much and speak to like imams and things like that.
Ah,
Because
okay, cool.
I was there with a group that wanted to study Islam. Like, Islamic studies.
Okay. Ray and Volt, how about you guys? How you doing?
Fine. I'm very fine right now.
All right. Ray, how about you?
Yeah, pretty good. You said that he didn't want to give us any time, academic Asian that is, but he still let me on his show just last week.
He did. That's true enough. But of course, I mean, I tweeted it, and I think you saw it. Some of the comments left after that conversation, that episode of Unpopular Opinions, were
They were
just
pretty angry. Yeah, I think his regular viewing audience is pretty angry. And then what happened after that was kind of like let into their Discord, and it went kind of differently. Not sure if academic Asian has figured it out yet, but they don't seem to have. How can I put this? They'll be angry with you for about 3 days, and then when they realize that you're an actual human being, things start to actually be kind of different.
oh yeah, like
Yeah,
I've
so I
always
think
found.
academic agent's main thrust was to try to prevent me from becoming an actual human being in their eyes, and yeah, it's not working.
But it does
Yeah,
look like that's his point. I mean, with me as well. It's never try to debate. It's always, slander and push down for no reason whatsoever.
oh yeah. I
I
mean,
wonder how much money.
I think it's weird. It's very weird on his part because he's so unwilling to just he's so unwilling to steel man sometimes is how I would put it. It's not that he would straw man you necessarily, but it's just an unwillingness to really hear someone out, and so it's better just not to have them on. But of course, the funniest thing about that conversation was it wasn't so much people disagreeing with you. It was just people calling you low IQ or dumb, or just like, oh, that you're rude and disruptive, which I thought was hilarious. Because one, I didn't think you were any more disruptive than literally anybody else at the table, really, because it seemed like there was a fair amount of interruption going on
Yeah.
all sides.
Yeah, the thing that I noticed from the chat is that basically, if I actually ask in the chat, okay, so why do you consider like my behavior to be disruptive, but like actual trolls to not be disruptive? Like, I actually got back the literal response from people in the chat of because we are biased against you, and I was like, well, okay, you just made my argument for me then.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
they're at the point where they'll literally admit to it.
I mean,
At least some of his followers, and I wanted to sort of distinguish between like the followers that are like the people in the Discord who kind of see these things as being slightly ironic, whereas the followers who are on on YouTube that often appear in his chats, totally different kind of people in that sense. The people in his chats are like the real cult members, if you like.
Yeah, I agree.
Whereas
I mean,
on the Discord, on his Discord, it's not necessarily cult members.
No, they really. I have no issue with Discord people, honestly. I was there, a few months ago, and they're quite nice.
Yeah, for the brief time I was in there, it seemed like everybody was willing to talk, but it also seems like there's a secret Gestapo amongst there of people where, you step too far out of the bounds and the banhammer comes down fast and uh, without chance to appeal and those sorts of things. But really, I found far more interesting. One of the impetuses for this stream in particular was my interaction with him on Twitter, in which he called me the lowest IQ YouTuber he's ever met, or
Yeah.
something like that. I forget the tweet. Someone shared the screen cap with me.
Yeah, he did call you low IQ.
Which, look, I mean, I've seen his chat, so perhaps he does indeed know what low IQ is. So, but my big, the reason I just found it fascinating was because it wasn't to him that I was putting forth bad arguments. It was simply that I was questioning his fundamental assertions. Like, my point with him has always been, he's an Austrian libertarian, and I've categorically rejected Austrian premises for some time now, because to me they're just meaningless and they don't tell us anything about reality. Like the central axiom of praxeology, that being humans act with purpose or humans act purposefully, it tells us very little about the human condition and why certain things turn out the way they do. Because it's one thing to say humans will act to gain food for the purpose of feeding themselves. But that doesn't tell you why they'll choose one food over the other or why they'll save up food. Like that whole, people act with purpose flies in the face of things like time preference and so forth and so on. And so it's, it's amazing to me why, he's just so unwilling to talk. It is sort of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're complaining about praxeology, but yeah, I agree. It's ridiculous. And the funny thing is, talking about economy now, when I joined the blood sports in the end, when he liked me, he liked me in the end. I told him I have this post-Keynesian, my friend is moving here, shaking the table. I have this post-Keynesian friend that you could talk to. Would be rather interesting. He said, nah. Well, he didn't say no, but he just pushed it to the side and called me stupid afterwards, which is like, okay, fuck you. But then a few months later, he literally has a conversation with him on Twitter, together with Lord Keynes, because Lord Keynes also agrees with monarchy. Monarchy is the one I'm talking about. And then made, 2 or 3 videos about it. It's like, yeah, you're an asshole. But I found a tweet that you were talking about. Academic Agent says, I block Pragmatic Culture for being the lowest IQ YouTuber on the planet, which is saying something.
Apparently, but yeah, he's very quick to dismiss, which is a shame. But even worse than that, potentially, is that it's really just the rigidity. It's the quickness to dismiss combined with the rigidity is the problem. Because I can understand you sort of people dismissing things out of hand, but then the unwillingness to discuss them is worse. Like there's very few issues like I'd say that's appropriate for, like the exceptions being issues of child ickiness, things relating to gross stuff like that. Like that's like all right.
Never talk about,
Yeah, which you should never talk about, and I won't even say the word just because I don't want. I don't want to give the censors a reason.
If we compare AA to you, I mean, you're much better, even though, like, let's say the podcast we had, or was it podcast? Yeah, our podcast. We had an open conversation, we talked, and I could say mine, and you can say yours. He would never do a thing like that, because I don't know why he wouldn't. I mean, isn't it good to reach out?
Echo chambers are a wonderful thing. They insulate you. It's like what's that famous quote from Joseph Goebbels? Dang.
Well, Goebbels is a lot better when it hits up here, but if you lie enough, it becomes reality. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's more like he has immunized himself against all dangers, and and once he's been found out, he recoils, saying,
I've been found out. Yes. Okay. I know what you're quoting now. Yeah. Well, it's especially bad for AA because they're so, like, I think, Ray, to reference the stream you had with him, there were so many issues where it was clear that, you knew what you were talking about, and it was clear that they were just kind of spouting rhetoric and platitudes particularly in like the vein of talking about like the soaps thing in Japan, and talking about corporatism and monopolies and efficiency and down the line type of things, barriers to entry, all that sort of thing. And really, like, I personally have decided that economics just isn't, as a subject, isn't really worth particularly talking about anymore, because it's all just witchcraft. Modern econ is literally just witchcraft. But other than that, I thought you were making, correct points that they seem to just categorically be rejecting for no other reason than it's not a Austrian libertarian worldview.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times they don't want to kind of go down the path that I'm going down, because I think they know on some level where it's going to end up. So they'll always try to shut me out at the beginning of what's being said.
Yeah, it's true enough. I think there's that, and it's like there's the constant accusations of interruption, and I think there's also, obviously there's
I've been accused of interrupting in cases where the person has asked me a question, I've responded to it.
Yeah, like, you're not letting them finish the question, yada yada. But
exactly. And the other one that I was accused of, this is a long, long time ago, where there was an instance where I chose not to respond to a question, and then people said, "Oh, you took too long to respond." And I'm thinking, okay, so which one do you want? Interruptions or taking long?
Yeah, and with AA, it's very much, or with AA's crew, I should say, it's very much they've sort of just decided that you're a dumb person and you're not worth talking
No,
to.
I don't even think they believe that based on the interactions. It's that they need to say that in comments afterwards.
That's an
and
interesting
the
view.
reason I know that is because back in the old days when Academic had his first Twitter account, after his first 5 or so streams with me or whatever, there were some people in his Twitter who were saying, "Oh, it's very good that you have Ray on, etc., etc. We should pay more attention to what she's saying, etc., etc." And then he actually responded to one of them and said, "Oh, this is a problem then." And then from then on, he changed his whole tag.
I don't get, what did he say? What did he mean by that's the problem?
Oh, it's a problem that they are open to things that I'm saying because he's letting me talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so from that point onwards, he was in basically shaping mode, which is why he said to me that he wanted to not have me as a person who just comments on things. He wanted to build me up as the ultimate enemy from his perspective. And so I said to him at that time, well, at the moment, I'm making basic centrist talking points, so I'm not sure how you're going to make that the ultimate enemy unless you want to shift the Overton window so far to the right that it goes off a cliff. And then, of course, he proceeded to do that. So,
well, we should signify here, and that's the second point to this stream, because we will be using A as our sort of idol to burn in effigy, so to speak. Effigy, idol, I don't know. But there is something to AA which resonates of the boomer mindset in general, which is sort of this, it's the mentality of sort of the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps type thing, but it's this complete sort of weird, it is libertarian individualism to some extent, but it's abstracted out of all context. Like when you were talking about, also in that stream, how the US inserted CIA operatives, or maybe not CIA, but federal agents into labor forces throughout
no, it was the CIA, because you would have to be using the CIA if you're operating outside the US anyway. So yes,
right,
it was the CIA that was used inside labor movements, not in some nefarious purpose, but rather to advise them on how not to be infiltrated by Soviets while still remaining part of the left. Which obviously is something that you'd want to do if you were influencing a foreign power that has sort of like 50% of the population wants to join a quote-unquote Labour Party. Then obviously you'd want that Labour Party to be immune to Soviet influence because you're in the middle of a Cold War against those very same people. So you'd want a form of leftism which is not configured in such a way that Soviets can enter it very easily. They just refuse to listen to that. But this is not the first time I've explained that to Academic Asian. I actually explained that to him in detail with sources in private, where I was trying to convince him back at the beginning, sometime I think it was like early 2018, late 2017, where I said to him, okay, why are you going in this direction and not listening to the idea that the Cold War was more complicated than you think it was? It wasn't just like Margaret Thatcher came out and then suddenly everything was destroyed. Like, that's not how it went.
No, that's definite. And I think that plays into the larger boomer. I'll let you go in just a second, Volt, but I think that plays into the larger boomer mentality, and just that, things like free trade and the global order that came to be are all sort of downstream from a certain economic policy, as opposed to the careful plottings of people much higher up the food chain who set it out to be such a way. Like, one of the people who I think does a great job of laying this out, and I can't recommend him enough, is Peter Zion, who constantly reiterates that the current global order was built by the US as an anti-Soviet game. Like, our economic policy was not to our benefit. It was purely anti-Soviet based.
For the purpose of containment. And so the international order they constructed, which was for their, well, obviously it was to their benefit to contain the Soviets, of course, it had obviously knock-on effects, because it means you have to build up other people who are not the United States in order to have that containment be effective. Otherwise, they'll just go with the Soviet Union, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
They did that, and obviously the logical outcome of that is that the order which has been created contains the seeds of its own undoing. Because if you build up an ally to be your satrap during a war, then eventually that satrap will have accumulated enough productive force to actually say, wait a second, why am I your satrap? I could just be your equal now.
Yeah, well,
and then there you go.
Yeah, that's part of it. And I think the problem, from a sort of U.S. nationalist perspective, which I'm always appreciative of your candidness when you go on streams, because one of my favorite quotes of you from that line was like, "None of you are Americans, so why should you care about America?" Which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, I found that weird as well, because their defense of a certain subsection of America, which they are not a part of and could never fit in with, that always strikes me as strange, because I'm kind of like, okay, well, sure, I can understand, like, if someone who was one of them had said that, then I'd be able to say, okay, yeah, maybe they're arguing their own interest there. They don't want to actually lose relative power, even though they're not losing absolute power, given that obviously they're not becoming poorer. They're just having to deal with other people who are also about as wealthy as them now, right? So it becomes a relative power thing. But for them, why are they mourning the loss of relative power of the United States when they're all living in the countries that benefited from not having that disparity? For example, if Academic Agent claims that he's supposed to be like, defender of Britain or whatever it is he's styling himself as, then like, why does he care if the United Kingdom stands eye to eye with the United States at some point in the future?
Well, I think it's because fundamentally, on a deeper level, they know that it's really the U.S. and the machinations of U.S. foreign policy that have built this sort of uh, uh, framework for the global neoliberal world order, that have secured the free trade, which they fetishize, and has secured this sort of free marketplace kind of idea. Like, it's ironically enough, it's government power which secured, like, the libertarian utopia of, like, the 80s or the late 50s that they so much wish to return to. And so, as much as they'd like to sort of imagine it's the pull yourself up by the bootstrap type thing, and it's like completely separate from the fact that you were living in the greatest economic boom of history, laws were different, culture was different, all these things, as they'd like to just sort of abstract the individual out of all of that. But deep down, I think they know that that's not really an accurate representation of the world in any way whatsoever. Volt, you just said something in chat. What did you say before? Yep, you muted yourself again, Volt.
Good talk.
All right. I've been reading the last stuff about the Cold War, more specifically the theoreticians of containment, what they wanted, like as Dean, Aktion, George Kennan, those type of people. And they explicitly outlined that they wanted to secure the 5 industrial regions of the world, such as Europe, Japan, China to a lesser degree, to form an anti-Soviet coalition in the long term of things. And I guess it's been successful since the USSR end up being reliant on such as countries as Ethiopia, Cuba. Wait, it's not Ethiopia, it's Angola, and more unpopular and less and significantly your allies in the end. It's kind of interesting,
It's rather funny because I think
the collaboration with China was for the same reason as well. That book by Friedman, not the Friedman that is the Austrian school Friedman, a different one,
Yeah,
wrote recently, 2015, that was recently, yeah, where they basically summarized that the shadow Cold War over the Third World waged between the Soviet Union versus China was also essentially a geostrategic game, which is basically how much of that Third World can you deny to the Soviet Union?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was going to say now that there isn't a Soviet Union any longer, it's very much been China that's sort of picked up the neo-colonialism game and really
Well, I wouldn't
the
call it neo-colonialism, but yeah,
I know you
I
wouldn't
get where you're
call it
going.
neo-colonialism because you're an advocate of the neo-co-prosperity sphere. So of course you wouldn't call it that. But I'm not a fan of that sort of language either. But I mean, to use the common parlance, so to speak,
Yeah.
it's China is very
Because
much
basically China won in that zone, because after everything else went away, there's very little Russian traction in certain parts of the world. Like, for instance, in Africa, with the exception of, like, I don't know, some elements of the Nigerian ruling class and like South Africa, Russia's presence in Africa is basically nil.
Oh yeah, and well, the funny thing is, I think now, what you're seeing with China, what China's doing in Africa, essentially, which was, I saw like a funny little card. Oh no, I saw somebody posted some sort of meme where it's like, China goes in, they build this infrastructure, the African countries can't pay that back, so they claim the infrastructure. And I know, it's a little bit more complicated than that, obviously, but I thought it was rather funny because it's sort of the idea behind deals like TPP and a lot of other trade deals and things like that was very much aimed at a new type of containment, but as opposed to the Soviet Union, this time it would be China. And I felt, when I was talking to a lot of people
I
about
wouldn't call it
TPP, saying,
containment either. I think that was more subtle what they tried to do with TPP, because they're not trying to contain China, but rather they're trying to shape the rise of China. That's their preferred terminology. And the reason for that is because they're okay with Chinese expansion, and by expansion I mean economic expansion, of course, if it goes in a direction that does not take them into the South China Sea. So, for
that's true.
example, this is why you see people like Stephen Blank, for example, writing at NBS, where he was all like, I think he put it quite bluntly, in European geostrategy, he put it very bluntly when he said that the wonderful thing is that all of China's gains have not actually been against India, against the United States, against Japan, against South Korea, and so on, because of the fact that there's been essentially a wall of ships preventing that from happening, and instead China has chosen the path of least resistance, which is into Central Asia, which is at Russia's expense. So I
Yeah.
think the North Atlantic is perfectly happy to let China have economic expansion and to continue to dump its sort of overheated sort of overproduction into developing Central Asia, because the only people who lose influence as a result of that would be obviously Russians.
Yeah, you're right. Most of the West is completely happy with that. I think the problem now is, and this is one of the big deal reasons I think, of course, TPP didn't go through and why there was such a backlash against it was because,
Or at least the United States refused to join TPP, because it has been signed into
oh yeah,
existence.
no,
I
why
mean, it exists,
I
just
mean the
not
U.S.
with the US in it.
When I say we, I mean the U.S. When in this context, but like
Okay,
I
go on.
think the big reason I think that wasn't so is because one of the things Peter Zion has also pointed out is that it's no longer it's no longer a net gain for the United States to maintain free trade and open access to the seas and this stuff, because we're an incredibly unintegrated economy, globally speaking. All of our exports and imports make up roughly 8% of our GDP, which is, of course, no small fraction. But of course, it could go away and, we'd suffer a minor recession for a bit, but it'd certainly be nothing like 2008 and we'd bounce back fairly quickly. And so one of the reasons we're no longer so interested in shaping the economic expansion of nations like China is because it's just no longer in our benefit. And so I think that's one of the big deals for why we didn't, one, why we didn't sign, but two, why I think there's this sort of boomer resistance to Trump and sort of more pro-nationalist policies is because these people sort of view, free trade as this matrix of individualism, or they sort of view it in the context of the matrix of individualism, where like nations are individuals and they should be allowed to freely trade and stuff, and
Yeah,
marginal value and things like that.
yeah,
And
but
so
I
they
do
think
think
they
there's
can
two
do
factions of that, though. There are two factions of that view. There's the normal view, which is where they see trade deals as being net liberalizing, so they support them. And then there are the people who profess to support free trade, but nevertheless have constructed a very complicated argument for why a free trade deal is technically somehow not a free trade deal, which you'll see from academic Asian his type constantly. So they'll actually stand against all of these deals on the basis that they don't want to empower states who wield them. So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, why would you not want to do that? But of course, obviously, they end up producing results that are unexpected, because if you join a trade deal, then you can and you're sort of like a big elephant in the room, then you can participate in shaping the way that deal is actualized. Whereas in the case of like pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, then it just means you've actually left Japan in charge.
Yeah, well, it's sort of,
which I would have thought was not the thing that they wanted to do, but they've produced that result.
yeah, well, I mean, the United States was there's a I'm gonna keep name dropping Peter Zion because I just keep listening to his lectures. But one of the funny things that happened in the '80s with the Japanese downward market spiral, Zion very much attributes that to U.S. economic policy, in that essentially anytime we'd go over there to negotiate trade, the negotiator, I forget his name. He's actually in the Trump administration right now. I can't think of his. Yes, Lighthizer. Wow, I'm always amazed with like the information you can just pull. But yes, Lighthizer. He'd go over there. He'd state his position, and then as the Japanese were talking, he would be taking his translation machine apart and making the pieces fight. Then once they were done, he'd put it back together and say, "Great, we're doing what I want now, right?" And it's just amazing to think that the reason I don't think we particularly cared about the TPP was because, one, it's no longer beneficial to the U.S. to shape the economic destiny of rival nations, because we don't need to worry about them economically speaking anyway. And two, any other nation that would take over, we've essentially had in our pocket since forever. In terms of geopolitical time. So
yeah, but then
it's not much of a concern.
Why antagonize them then? Because by creating this sort of polarization of everyone disliking Donald Trump and the people who are behind him, for example, they've made it so these people are less likely to have to accommodate what's called the how did the British Empire put it? It was the gentle something. The gentle not gentle decline, because that was what they called it with the British Empire. In the case of the United States, they had a different word for it. They had it was and it was not rebalancing either, because that's not the term they like to use either, although that is the one being used. It was something else, but basically it describes a scenario in which the United States has essentially sort of linked itself to other people and got a relationship with them, and then it is stepping back and allowing the deputies to become to sort of rather than fighting it, I'm trying to quote become great again. They're just going to say, okay, do whatever you want, just don't harm us, because they've already got the understanding that these people will not fight the US directly. Again.
Yeah, well, for one,
and that's why Hillary Clinton was doing that thing where she kept talking about she wanted a hemispheric trade
free
agreement,
trade block, something like that.
Yeah, and that was basically the accommodation stance of basically, okay, we can't control everything, but if we just like leave you alone while also being amicable toward you, then it won't actually make you want to take the risk of upsetting us first.
Yeah, well, I think
what Trump did was Trump came out and said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upset all of you first, thus giving you all an excuse to do things that you otherwise would not have been able to get away with politically. Which is how you end up with people like Macron or Merkel talking about how, you can't trust the US anymore. We're going to have to come up with ideas on our own. Whereas if it was Hillary Clinton there, she probably would have gotten away with massaging them into doing what she wanted.
Yeah, no, but I think the big deal is that we don't need them to do what we want, because they are of no use to us anymore. Neither are any of the other so-called deputies. And I think it was always sort of a pipe dream that they'd ever sort of stack up to us in any sense. In Peter Zion's first book, The Accidental Superpower.
Didn't this happen before in a previous mode of production though? This same thing happened to the Greek Empire, did it not? Where they created,
how so?
Well, no, not just was it Roman? No, it was the Greek, wasn't it?
Byzantines?
Yes. No, it was the Greeks. And it was at the point where Alexander the Great, it was just after Alexander the Great had died. And then everyone was kind of like, hey, what if we just had four different competing powers instead? That kind of thing. That's the kind of thing you'd want to avoid, wasn't it?
Well, we don't need to.
That.
Oh, I'll go on, Pomen.
No one said back in the day, let's create 4 powers. The reason
why... you know what I mean, though. They didn't say it, but it happened, because obviously the fallout was that
they had no power after Alexander. and he just moved the troops back to Greece because
So
there's no point.
I get the comparison, but I think here's what would really happen in a modern day context. There is going if the U.S. stops propping up the global world order, which it eventually will, and Trump's just been accelerating that at a much faster pace. The U.S. is still going to be a superpower. Its geography, its wealth and natural resources, its demography have essentially ensured that unless some absolute catastrophe happens, like on the scale of the Yellowstone volcano erupting, we're going to be a superpower almost in perpetuity, or at least for the next millennia. But once we stop,
that's quite a prediction.
I'd be willing to
is a
stand
long
by it.
time.
No, it is, but I'd be willing to stand by it, and Zion makes a compelling case for it in his first book. But what I'd also say is that once we simply stop propping up the global world order, that there will sort of be a case similar to what you're saying, where it's, you're going to have Alexander's generals vying for power, but they're still never going to come close to threatening the United States' position. And Zion makes the prediction: the four nations, he says,
these still impact you on the way that you interact with the rest of the world, though. Because think of it this way: even people who are positively disposed toward the U.S., which were many, by the way, people underestimate the extent to which people were accommodating of the U.S. anyway, because they may have actual positive feelings toward them. It kind of makes it a bit sour if basically the U.S.'s final action before stepping back is to deliberately attempt to throw the game to Russia.
Yeah,
people are going to remember that.
Well, the throwing things to Russia, depending on what context you mean that in, the predictions for who's going to be a superpower come, the collapse of the world order, it ain't looking good for Russia, to say the least. Military armaments aside, there's still sort of an underlying principle of mutually assured destruction. But
I agree that obviously Russia has factors that make it untenable for them to do some of the things that you would think that they could do, but it's not. It wouldn't even be about actuality. It would be about the intent, because people perceive the intent as being that, okay, they've come all of this way with these other countries, and now their action is, okay, we're going to step back, and also we're going to try our darndest to empower Russia before we step back. Like, why would someone do that?
Well, I think that's the perception, but again, that's not the case, because it's however much influence Russia could still sort of grasp at with straws at the moment. Not only are they not going to be challenging us, but let's just assume worst case scenario for the world order, and Brexit goes through, no deal, and then a whole bunch of other nations start to leave, and let's say the European Common Zone just completely collapses.
I doubt that will happen. The reason I doubt it is because the United Kingdom leaving the European Union may paradoxically strengthen it.
Yeah, no, again, this is worse. This is worst case scenario right here. But I'm just saying, Russia's still the collapse of the European Common Zone. Let's even say the disintegration of NATO to make it truly the worst case. It's you're still not going to have Russia being hyper, militarily aggressive. Russia's last bout of militarism was really Ukraine, and that did not go the way they wanted it to at all. They got Crimea, they got their warm water port, but
you're a bit wrong. I mean, because you're ignoring all of the other aggressions that they're doing. I mean, I hope they constantly bully our Air Force, for example.
No, they can bully our Air Force all they want. At the end of the day, that's the equivalent of of the third grader, poking the fifth grader and say, hey, you're not going to hit me back. Hey, you're not going to hit me back. And we're not going to hit you back, because if we do, it's going to cause a global incident.
You also created a scenario where you said, remove both the EU and NATO and Russia won't be aggressive. It's what are you on about? Of course they will.
Well, they'll try to. Well, my point isn't that they won't try to be, or that their attitude will suddenly change towards the world. No, they'll absolutely try to be. My point would be that you'd still have, some semblance of European unity, such that they could be repelled with just the EU. Even if you didn't have the EU or NATO, you'd have some combined European coalition that would be able to effectively stifle Russian military advancements. Because I keep thinking,
not really, no.
No, well, no. I think people throughout history, what have the Russians had? The Russians have had numbers, and that's pretty much it. Their tech is so crap.
Russia's never been fully aggressors either. They always been attacked usually.
I
and
mean,
then after they've been attacked, they've beaten the enemy.
Volt Rorschach, would you like to say something? Volt?
No, it's just mute his goddamn mic.
Oh, you're back.
Voltaire?
Okay, we can hear you. Go. You were going to say something, right? Oh, all right. Never mind.
Mike.
All right.
So echo from your side, dude.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a tweet from Bill Crystal.
Oh, that's right. You wanted, yeah. Well, I mean, Bill Crystal is one of the people who's to get back to AA because Pomen wanted more AA bashing. So I'll return to rope it back in. We talked about like the conception of like, the people who see free trade deals for what they are, which is liberalizing. And there's like the libertarians who say, free trade deals aren't really free trade. Well, they're just being, I wouldn't say dishonest, but they're living in sort of a sort of a figment of their own mind. Because
either that, or they want to actually support Donald Trump without having to actually argue the squalid argument. What they used to call the squalid argument back in the day. Like, I mean, this is back, obviously, in like 1914 in Britain, they had something called the squalid argument, which is where you argue directly for protectionist measures on purpose. Now, obviously, if libertarians were to come out and actually do that, then that would reveal the hand that these, quote, libertarians actually support Donald Trump because of social reasons, and they don't want to be seen to
they support
to be actually violating their principles. So instead of that, they've come up with this very acrobatic way of still managing to support what's happening while simultaneously saying, oh, it's not because we actually want the protectionism, but rather because we're actually against free trade deals because they're not really free trade deals. Okay. It's very bizarre, but that's the impression I got. And the reason I got that impression is because I saw Academic Agent develop from being this quote unquote centrist into what he presently is now. And most of it seems to have been on social issues.
I mean,
he had to basically twist the economics afterwards to make it line up.
Yeah, Pomen, you go.
The reason why libertarians usually is a pipeline is because of the social aspect. You started with the economic aspect, but then there's people like vote for Trump. Volt, mute your goddamn fucking mic. For fuck's sake, Volt. But but social issues, as you say, the libertarians vote for Trump is not economic issues because Trump's system is still the American economic system, American economic school, something it's called, which is literally protectionism and national economy, which you had back before World War II, but then they changed it obviously afterwards. But Trump's want to go back to this old protectionistic economy.
Yes. Well, see, I think there's an easy way to just fishimble out of it. Like, if you want to support Trump for social issues, then I think, you can be a libertarian who says that and say, I don't agree with him on the economics. I just think the social issues are more important now. So I don't think it's AA being sort of trying to fishimble himself into Trump's support. I think it's more, I'll let you go after this, Pomen. I think it's more, they generally buy into the libertarian mindset where free trade and freedom is absence of government to some extent, as opposed to like any actual effective definition of freedom, which has been, a balance between the social norms regulated by government and some individual expression of negative freedom.
That I fully agree with. But I think the reason why also Trump is supported this much is because he was seen as the underdog. He's seen as the man who could not be elected. So the reason why they defend him more is because he's so irregular. So you have to defend him because of his irregularities, even though you shouldn't really. I mean, I guess Trump played his card right. The fake news stuff and all of common
Well, one of the points that, again, Peter Zion likes to make about Trump is that, he's had bad things to say about the last 4 presidents, effectively, when it comes to their foreign policy. Like, he's a big critic of Obama's foreign policy, saying essentially that Obama was pretty much just absent on foreign policy, and the world sort of evolved around him as demonstrated by incidents in Syria and Crimea and things like that. Bush, he wasn't a fan of either Bush's or Clinton. I forget the exact reasons, but essentially what he said about Trump is that, Trump is sort of the successor of a line of idiots when it comes to foreign policy, but that he has a point in that the global order no longer works for us. And so it seems as though he's sympathetic to Trump's points, or he understands them, but Zion is still sort of a globalist, quote unquote, himself, who wants to see free trade continue and things like that. And I think a more honest academic agent would look something along the lines of a Peter Zion, who says, I am a neoliberal, not, some weird Austrian libertarian. And I want greater liberalization, and I want it however it comes. Not this, not this sort of like, if liberalization comes, via government, it's not really liberalization, which is, I think, I think for all AA's reading, I think he knows what he's doing to some extent. I think he still chooses to willfully. I think part of it is willfully ignoring it. The other part of it is just. Part of it is, I think, actually buying into the Messianism, but I don't know. Pomen, you wanted more Volt bashing, so you want, or not Volt bashing.
No, let's do Volt bash now. No, I want AA bashing.
Yes, so go off. Take the go off.
We've been going for 40 minutes, nearly no AA bashing. So AA poo-poo brain. No, no, just kidding. I do want to go back to his behavior a tiny bit.
Sure.
I mentioned monarchy and I mentioned his behavior, and we are fully correct with all of this, and even the overall debates about the Cold War, about his economy. He doesn't know much. He doesn't know enough to debate, so he chooses not to debate, either because he's afraid or either because his ego is so blinding him. But I had a Twitter feud with him, which I want to mention because it's fucking hilarious. So in 13th of March, which was the day before the first person came for our little meetup, I was bored as all hell. I was literally just bored. So I posted shit ton on Twitter. And I like to do Ray and AA jokes, usually about banging, because I do think that AA has a sort of attraction towards Ray, which is my guess, and it has been backed up by his behavior, regardless of that. So I did. I posted a little 6 seconds little funny clip of Family Guy, where Quagmire asks two lesbians if they ever been penetrated, and then he gets thrown out of the lesbian pub.
Yes, I remember seeing that. I thought that was very funny. More funny was his reaction to it, though.
I know. So I know it's just a quirky little thing, little joke.
Yeah.
The best way.
And he had this insane, hyperbolic, weird reaction to it, and I'm just thinking, that's bizarre.
I'll come to it. I'll show it. So in my head, I thought, this could backfire really badly. Because his response could be something like, well, I'm not the one doing a podcast with that. He could just turn it to me and said, well, you want to bang Ray.
Yeah, there were so many different ways he could have sort of got himself out of that.
Absolutely.
Instead of just essentially spurging, which is what he did.
And I will read what he said here. So, first of all, I want to say also, the dickhead doesn't write on my tweets. He makes other tweets using
the quote tweet thing.
I hate that because it's like, fucking, I want attention.
Basically, it's often interpreted on Twitter that when someone is excessively quote tweeting, it's that they're basically just trying to invite the mob because they're desperate.
Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting you say that because there's a mutual of yours who's done that a lot, but for another time. I'm sorry. Continue.
For another time. So if I read what he says, it's like. Oh, look, a snide, sniveling, gutless, weak, low IQ supporter of a non-Japanese trap. I'm surprised you're not waving the banner for the Yang Gang, Pomen.
And literally, that's just the line of nothing. It's incredible. Because I was just thinking, okay, well, you know that none of these things are accurate descriptions of anything that's happening here, like down to anything.
No, it's literally just a joke. And then I said, calm down, buddy. It's a joke. Don't take it personally. And then it says, you're utter vermin. A disgrace to your race, your country, and its history. What?
Those are big words coming from an Anglo, I have to say.
And he's not
coming from an Iranian Jew.
Wait, well, hold on. What is this lore? I haven't heard this before.
It's not lore. The whole thing of him essentially turning all conversations toward pretending that he doesn't know what other people's race is basically an attempt to prevent anyone else from highlighting what's going on with him. So, for example, it's entirely a defensive thing. It's entirely defensive. And so, obviously, from his perspective, he obviously knows that Pomen is Swedish. He knows that I'm obviously Japanese. And this is how the reality is, right? So, rather than engage with that fact and then have a conversation about race, instead, he'll just pretend that either people are not what they're saying that they are, or he'll go on the offensive on like some weird gender thing that makes no sense at all either.
But is he? Oh, but hold on now. I was more interested in the implication that AA is, in fact, an Iranian Jew.
Yeah, he's Iranian Jew.
I think that's why he's doing it, because he doesn't want anyone to actually respond with that, because he knows that if he comes out of the gate essentially saying things which are non-true, then I'm not going to put a response tweet to what he just wrote, normal Pomen, basically, because of the fact that, well, we're not going to sort of want to boost his lies, as it were, about any of the two of us, right? So it means he gets to sort of get his punch in scot-free, right?
Interesting.
Whereas if he had gone with, like, I don't know, the actual prejudicial quotes that he is really thinking, like, for example, if he had written, for example, Japanese lesbian, etc., then first off, that would be problematic because homophobia, final frontier, right? He won't be able to get away with that. Second, it would look like it's obviously racism. So instead, you just invert it, right? And then if he had done that, I would have actually responded to it by pointing out, well, that's kind of an interesting, I don't know, diss coming from, the Iranian Jewish boy or something. So obviously he doesn't want that to actually be a response. So he's going to do everything possible to make sure he doesn't get that response.
Okay.
If you did that response, he'd just report you anyway.
No. That's fair enough and all that. But I just want to know: is it actually confirmed that he's that, or is this just a response we're thinking?
We don't know. We don't know how much Jewish he is.
Yeah, we don't know the percentage, but it is there.
So give and take the Jewish part. Iranian, we know. We know that.
Yeah, the Iranian thing, we have that down to like 50% at least.
Oh, so is he not? So he's not even Anglo.
He's not. He's never been an Anglo.
Oh my God! This gives me a whole new view on him, because, like, the way I look at it, he always seems like he's this champion of, like, a harsher immigration restriction and things like that, and as like a defender of his like Welshness and things like that.
But he's never defended that.
As part of the game, he actually said to me anyway, and I have like screenshotted proof of it anyway, but he's actually said to me in the past that the reason that he engages on the whole nationalistic thing is because he perceives the whole sort of nationalistic pseudo talk to be a, quote, efficient way of distracting the British people while destroying Leviathan.
Yeah.
He sees it as a distraction, which is unfortunate.
The guy's an awful person. Same thing with distributist. He's also a Jew, so... Well, all right, I don't...
Well, hold on.
Yes? What? I never heard that.
He has Jewish genes in him, at least.
But that's where is this come from?
I don't want this to turn into an anti-Semitic stream. That's not the point.
Of course,
well, no, I just want to know where you've heard that before.
Yeah, no one is trying to be anti-Semitic on purpose here, but we're just saying that it's interesting that some of these people who have sort of cleaved themselves to, like, populist talking points about the defense of whiteness and so on happen to actually not be white.
Yeah, but they're not talking about whiteness. Both distributist and AA is literally talking about the replacement. So if you're gonna go into far right conspiracy theories,
hold on now. I don't know if
they are.
No. AA is fine. The distributist, I don't think I've ever heard him talk about.
Yeah, he has.
I mean, I'm sure he's talked about it, but he's never talked about it as if it's a good thing.
He has.
Hold on, where?
Literally the thing about us.
What do you mean the thing about us?
He made a video about
The,
us.
like the stream responding to your stream with Cartoodle. Yeah. Okay.
Listen to certain words he says. He's okay with Asian nationalism. Anything on the East is fine, but the West has to accept how things are and how things will become.
Oh yes, I remember he did say that. Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
strange too because I wasn't expecting him to do that.
Yeah, so he literally anti-white rhetoric.
Wait, why the academic Asian is so two-faced and slimy? Like, why he always?
I mean,
I'm
he's
not
race
sure why
mixed.
he does it.
He's race mixed. I mean, one thing
You know,
about
these are not Arabs, right? They're Indo something.
Indo-Europeans, yes, but okay, I don't want to empathize either. I don't. Neither of distributors nor AA's mother is a Jew, so. But it's just loppy to call them a Jew. But regardless of that,
yeah, we should.
It's just fun. It's, the reason why that is fun to say is because they're advocating anti-white rhetoric while also being or having Jewish genes. But
I'll have to go back and check the distributist one because I don't remember the words being that or with that connotation.
In the chat.
Can we go Can we go back to the upholding world order stuff a little bit? Because I won't recommend.
No, we should go back to AA. We'll get there, buddy. Yeah, but it's irrelevant. But I would say when it comes to AA, it's a mixture of race mixed identity issues, which is like what should you identify as if you're not fully Anglo. Well, you're not Anglo. He's not Anglo-Saxon, but he one of his parents is Anglo, and one of his parents is probably Iranian, and it creates an issue. He's brown, as we know. He is brown, so he can't identify as Anglo or Anglo-Saxon or
yes,
Celtic.
I remember he did make the joke once. Yeah, he did make the joke.
No,
he ends up getting searched in airports, wasn't it?
That too, but Ray, you've seen the photo.
I never. No. This is something that I actually didn't do. I never actually saw.
Don't
you know that
lie,
time?
Ray,
No, seriously. You know that time when they actually doxed him at the beginning, and I basically saved him.
You
out
saw
of the doxing?
photo.
I never actually saw the photo myself.
Well, at least the people that.
Okay, that's right. I forgot. He has a dox out there. I don't want to throw that out there because I'm not into that, but.
It wasn't. No. This is the thing that has to be specified. He wasn't actually doxed because of the fact that even though he was on the cusp of being doxed by 8chan, I leveraged my influence basically to make them not do it, and they deleted everything. And I also wasn't able to see the photo myself, so I can't even confirm what the docs were. They
claim they're brown. He's brown at least, and according to the airport security thing, it would make sense.
Also, this is something I want to highlight, even though I've said it before, but I find it quite ironic, by the way, that I essentially made Academic Agent's internet career possible by saving him from being doxed on stream number 2.
Well, that's no.
Yeah, and then he turned around and then he turned around and tried to unsuccessfully dox me, and then tried to claim that I don't exist because he was incapable of doing the doxing. That is astonishing.
You have some interesting, I mean, not doxing type stuff, but you have some other interesting information which he made publicly available himself, but we'll save that for another time.
Yeah, in all the instances where people claim that I've done horrifying things or whatever, I've literally done none of that whatsoever. Anything that Academic Agent has done to create problems for himself has been through him disclosing his own stuff.
Not only have you done none of it, but you've actually been holding back. Like, you've been hiding your true power level regarding AA for some time, which I find it hysterical. Considering like how he and his audience treat you.
No, it's not that much power level.
Have you told Pomen all the juiciness?
Yes.
He is aware that there is stuff.
It's power level, but it's not that high worth bragging about.
Well, exactly. It's not an ultimate knockout or anything like that. Because I think all of the truly damaging stuff is the stuff that I actually ordered people to delete.
Yeah, exactly. No, well, fair enough. But still, it's worth noting that Ray has been, significantly better than a lot of people give her credit for when it comes to something like that.
And I do agree. When it comes to Ray, I think overall she's very rational, but sometimes, Ray, you have your little emotional spurgs, and in those cases, you can be a dangerous fucking thing.
Well, I think the weirdest thing for me is you on streams, like AA streams, versus you on Twitter. Whereas, like, if I see you on Twitter and I'm genuinely unable sometimes to distinguish you from a sort of, a basic bitch neoliberal sort of Hillary Clintonite almost to some extent.
Really?
And then some of the things she tweets, it's not consistent, but it's definitely on some of them. Whereas, of course, you go on stream and it's much more nuanced, and it's, you obviously see the Fabian undertones come out more prominently. But it's very interesting. I think it's because you have so much knowledge that you can kind of assume other people have the same knowledge, and they absolutely don't. And so you jump to conclusions that other people haven't gotten to just because they just don't have access to that information, or they just haven't accessed it themselves.
There's also the difference between presentation on social media where you're writing versus what you would do in a stream. Because when you're on social media, obviously you're under the glare, basically, first off. And second off, there's I guess you could call it the 70-30 rule, which is basically 70% normal and 30% agenda, right?
Yeah,
and so when you're on
absolutely.
Twitter, for example, you can't just be on Twitter constantly like screaming into the void, because if you do that, then you're going to be seen as marginal instantly.
Yeah, definitely.
Do some funny memes and then say 9/11 was an inside job, and then do some other funny memes.
That kind of thing also doesn't work, because obviously you can't hold, like, you can't literally come up with positions that are just untenable.
Of course, I don't believe that, but that was a joke.
Yeah.
I think it's worth just to kind of bring it back a little bit to the title of the stream. I think AA is sort of a good example for a large portion of the sort of boomer mentality that we see coming up from not just the right, but also the left. It just presents itself differently on the left. And to the point...
Hold on. Just before you go on with that, since you mentioned that as a joke anyway, did you know, because I got some weird conversations coming from people who are asking me about 9/11 for some bizarre reason. I was thinking, why would they even question? Why would they even question as to whether I think 9/11 is real or not? And I was thinking, well, I think that everyone would know that I think that 9/11 was perpetrated by Al Qaeda, given that I've been supporting the war on terror since the year dot, right? No. Instead, I got some weird questions from people recently. I was thinking, why would they even ask me that? Because there's no circumstance under which I'd be endorsing a conspiracy theory created by Alex Jones, right? So I traced the thing back up. I traced it back up. Apparently, Academic Agent went on a stream possibly about 6 or 7 months ago and blatantly lied about my position in order to sick people on me. Seriously,
well, of course, he lies all the time.
Went on a stream. He actually went on a stream and claimed that I denied 9/11.
He lies the time. He does this all the time.
And so I'm constantly having to correct basic level stuff.
I mean, the video I made of it, sure, it was 6 months ago. Jesus Christ, 6 months ago. But I kind of explained to him being a two-faced liar, because he started saying things about me, about the video I made of him. It's like, oh, you see, this is Pomen's true color. And when it was Joe who asked him, well, have you watched the video? Oh, no, I haven't watched the video. Why are you making claims? What do you want to say, Bolt?
And also, I know it wasn't a mistake by him either, because we've had private conversations about my views on how significant the war on terror is. He knows this, because I've talked to him for probably there was a time when I talked to him for 4 hours about the issue of the importance of fighting the war on terror against Al Qaeda. 4 hours of me boring him half to death on that. Okay, so it's not like he didn't know what my position was. He just came out and deliberately and maliciously fabricated some lie and propagated it. It had to be deliberate.
I want to hear what Wolf wants to say.
I mean, why is he doing this? Is this for money?
I have no freaking idea.
Money.
See, I've been very consistent with the idea that AA makes the most super chat money when he has you on his unpopular opinion streams, because all of the super chats are just repetitions of kick Ray.
Oh yeah, so they're basically paying him to essentially say things to me which have no actual net effect. Then,
so if I may say this, I do think he created Ray's anger out of profit reasons, because when Ray's on, there's money. But Ray's on is usually more people than it. It's usually more people Ray's on. That's why he keeps wanting Ray on. Because Ray is the common enemy of these people. So everybody's hating on Ray.
I just keep
Makes
thinking they've
it-
chosen a very odd enemy as well.
I agree with. I
to be
agree.
like
I agree with that.
to be like, yeah, she's just too centrist. We just don't like that because
Well,
that's the thing they don't like
so-
about
so-
it. I'm thinking,
It's
Yeah,
really, that's
it's
the
not
thing they don't
because
like.
it's not because you're a centrist. It's because you're an honest. Well, you're an honest neoliberal in the sense that you're for accelerating neoliberalism to get, what's it, fully automatic luxury communism to some extent. But yes,
Yeah,
but
that was
I,
a great meme as well.
I mean, and also, I would say this as well. I don't think he's very open for new ideas. He's very boomerish like that. Like, old is the better. Because I remember when I was on, he actually got a bunch of super chats because he liked me. He got a bunch of money because of me, but he didn't want me on afterwards. It's like, Well,
You're very charming, dude.
thank you, Voltaire.
young Karl Marx is very charming.
No, young Karl Marx was actually a terrible person. Even though
Well, no, I mean, I'm referencing, for those who don't know in chat, Pomen has a channel, link in the description, and he recently posted a video with a face reveal, and I noted how much he happens to look like. He has the facial hair and not so much the facial structure of a young Karl Marx, but at least he's going for that. He very much looks. You do have that high German look about you.
I look like my father, which is Northern Germanic. Yes.
But anyway, Nick Fuentes describes the boomer cost. But yeah, see, I think all of the things we've just been describing about AA and all of this are symptomatic of boomerisms as a whole. Because really what you get is you sort of get the neoliberals who aren't honest about what they want. Like, you kind of get the Trump supporting neoliberals who talk about the free market, but at the same time are going to shill for Trump instead of just, either being nationalist or being neoliberal globalist. And then you have the same people who will sort of almost narcissistically attribute all their success to themselves and things like that, or that, economic action is all down to the individual and things like that, and completely abstract themselves from the setting in which, that accumulation occurred. And, that's what these various neoliberal ideologies are. They're all justifications for a kind of narcissism to some extent. Now, granted, I'm not in the Hillary Clinton camp fully of, it takes a village every single time and all that stuff, but it's also not fair to say that it was fully you. That is a certain amount of pridefulness, which I would say to, those Christian boomers, pride is a sin. So watch yourself. But I don't know. Is it fair to say that AA is representative of boomerdom as a whole?
Absolutely. In my video, I was 2 points I took up. One was his ego, because all this is kind of about how he presents himself. Another one being a boomer. I literally made a joke in the end, just boomer, boomer, fuck the boomers. Which is really funny. So yeah, he's a boomer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're gonna go into the boomer. But his ego is so much the way he wants to present themselves. And the funny thing is like I talked about in that video. It was 6 months ago. I talked about that video. I talked about True Little Tom and AA. That video actually made me friends, quote unquote, with True Little Tom for a little while, until he became bullied by Imperius.
Well, hold on. What's your beef with True Dill Tom now?
I have a lot of beef with True Little Tom. So, if you didn't know, a man named Imperius, he's the biggest cancer in the right wing.
Look, I mean, I know
No.
Imperius a little bit, but
he's cancerous.
Why?
He lies to you.
What does he lie about?
I lied quite a lot. I can give you something afterwards.
All right, yeah, after the stream. Okay, but go on.
To prove my point. But yeah, he's a rather cancerous person. He looks. What he does is he wants to get certain power over people. So he tries to poke wherever he can. He poked Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer allowed him in for a tiny bit. Didn't work. He poked Kurt. Kurt and I spoke about it. Kurt is autistic, so it sometimes he accepts him, sometimes he doesn't. I want to smack Kurt across the face, saying stop listening to this idiot. But
Well, Kurt is a boomer too, but
he's an autistic boomer. Yeah.
Well, I see. I know you're not going to like this, but propertarianism is indeed just another kind of liberalism that, which is also the boomer mindset. But
well, no, I disagree. But because
fair enough.
It talks about a lot more than you think.
All right, fair enough. But
there is a few boomers thinking that yes, I agree with that, but as a whole, what it can be reformed to and created in the future, no, not at all.
Yeah, but all right, but whatever. Imperious, or
yes,
the thing I'm going to jump in now on that just for a short while. The thing about propertarianism that I think distinguishes it from a liberal ideology in terms of what its potential is that it allows you to actually claim as property things like, well,
yes.
your genes, for example. Sorry, not allows, but it advocates claiming as property things that are not ordinarily seen as property in the present world order.
But it still uses that sort of Lockean justification for it, and it still sets out property norms and rights, sort of like a liberal ideology. It just expands the definition of property, which I don't think.
And you're right about that. I know you're not liking it, but we did talk about that, and I gave you the 3 different Lockean argumentations around it. But
all right, that's another stream. I'm sorry.
They're flawed, but anyways. But fuck, my point was, yeah, true little Tom. Fuck true little Tom. I have no respect for him after AA. No respect. He also shat.
Is it just because of Imperious though? Is it just because he's sort of taken up generative anthropology, or?
No, I don't care about Okay, so after the Kurt stream where he's like, generative anthropology is the main enemy of propertarianism, which it isn't. It isn't per se, but he wanted it to be. So he created us as enemies in his mindset, and then he started shitting on us. And the amount of okay, when I say this, Dylan, if you listen to this, you know why I'm shitting on you, all right?
He won't, but I'll show it to him anyway.
I do respect that you came to me and said sorry. Thank you. But yeah, you weren't very nice, and I'm gonna shit for you on that one. But so what Dylan has is narcissism. He's very insecure, and he has a high amount of narcissism. This is his personal issues. So because of this, I mean, you know, I like his casual look. Don't take me wrong, but because of this narcissism and insecurity, people like Josh, which is the name of Imperious, can easily trample over him, because all you have to talk about is like, I can start saying, let's say you were Tom and I was Josh, I will start negging you. I will neg you about your ideas. I will say, oh, Catholicism, it's kind of weird that you believe that. And sort of creating a father figure through Josh. And the more negging that happens, the more Tom becomes insecure, or you in this case will become insecure. And then he can shape you in that way. So that's what Josh have tried to do. And Josh succeeded in that, but I see Tom is not an idiot. I know Tom is not an idiot, and it has been back and forth quite a lot. I do wish that Tom threw out him fully, say fuck you, and see the truth of Imperious, but that will take a while.
I mean, look, I don't think he exemplifies a sort of boomer mindset or anything like that. And I don't think Dylan, I don't think.
No, God, no.
I think he's much more, you know, like we've always joked about his high neuroticism before, like when I was doing streams with him. But, you know, but it's not like, I don't know. I just don't think it's as crippling as you give it credit for. But
it is and it isn't. It is because of Josh. Because Josh is trained in a way, not trained per se, but he has experience in how to manipulate people. If it wasn't for that, Dylan would be fine. He would be fine.
Well, I don't know enough. I don't know enough about Josh.
I do still, there's a lot with that. I do still see Dylan as some sort of an ally. I'm sad that he saw us as enemies. We're not his enemies.
Well, I think his problem with propertarianism is the same problem as my problem with propertarianism, which is that, it's too reductionist, in my opinion. And I think he shares that opinion. We obviously have sort of different ontological viewpoints, because I am...
And the
What?
Says him that his worldview is even more reductionist.
I would heavily disagree with that. I don't disagree with his sort of ontological standing in the nature of like man, in what he would call like the scene or whatever. But I certainly don't. I certainly don't think he's a reductionist in any sense of it.
Do you believe language comes from a divine source?
In part, yeah. I mean, that's part of that's part of logos.
Yes, but he doesn't obviously believe in God, your God. So he believes. So imagine it without Yahweh, and then saying that language came from a divine source, but not Yahweh.
Yeah. Well, look, I respect other shots at deism or different metaphysics, so to speak. So, but again, I don't think it's fair to call it reductionist. Is just my point.
I just find it useless and pseudoscience.
Fair enough. Somebody in the chat asked, "Do y'all believe in evolution?" And I'd actually point to. Yes. I think it was either. It wasn't Imperious, but it was on a stream that Dylan had a while ago, and he had someone else on. I think it wasn't Imperious. It was his other kind of co-host. I forget his name, but the quote was something along the. Yeah, the quote is something along the lines like, "Evolution is a sufficient material explanation for the origin of species and things like that, but the ontological difference between man and his closest genetic relatives is enough to make evolution gay and wrong." Which is, I love that phrase so much because it's absolutely true. No, screw you. That's absolutely true. The ontological gap between like animals in their state of nature and man in his state of nature is absolutely insurmountable and unexplainable in terms of evolutionary processes.
It ain't. It's very easy to explain.
No, all right. We're not getting into this now, but it's absolutely not.
No, it absolutely is.
I know for another stream. But anyway, one thing we can agree on is that Trudel Tom and Josh and Imperious, at the very least, are not boomers, unlike AA.
No.
I think but that's the thing, though. One of the things, AA had a little spout with Dylan as well. Funnily enough, we all seem to have a very common enemy, and it all seems to be wrapped up in this conception that.
Guess who AA blamed for his second ban?
Yeah, he blamed Dylan. That's right. I forgot about that. But yeah, it's all wrapped up in this sort of belief that one. Economics is reducible to the individual or can be abstracted to the individual. Economics as philosophy and not psychology, more or less, which is also kind of philosophy. But
someone's leaving because of my voice. It's so sad.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Nice.
Your voice is like, I don't know what your voice is like. It's very obviously Nordic, but
yeah.
I don't know how to put it. It's actually weird. For the longest time, I couldn't place you. But Camus guy's voice is the one thing redeeming about him. Oof. Well, I'll have you Pomen on for another stream sometime about ontology and propertarianism and whatever. But I think because we all have this common enemy in Der Boomer, and it's all sort of this. It's not even a materialism, you can say, because you can have non-boomer materialisms. It's this kind of view in which there is, it's very much it's Cartesian in that there is cogito. There's people saying that I am because I think, and thinking that's good enough to constitute the summation of all actions occurring around them. Like that's why the boomer feels safe in abstracting their economic success from the surrounding economic reality. They pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. The setting around them and the absolute monetary and fiscal expansion of the government be damned to some extent. or, the policies the government put in place that enabled free trade and all these other products and cheaper goods and yada, 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 and cheap materials because the U.S. was the only country that wasn't bombed out of existence at the end of World War II and things like that. This is all stuff, the boomer will discount. And it goes beyond economics, too. It's also in social issues. Like you have does everybody know that Christina Hoff Sommers tweet? Millennials have something along the lines of millennials have moral panics and existential crises. At least we had sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Do you guys know that tweet?
Yeah, fuck her.
Yeah, no, it speaks to not only, a sort of material decadence, but a sort of spiritual degeneracy in which there was no standards, and that now that, people are starting to realize that it's not just, spiritual and philosophical standards that are setting in, but biological standards that are being reinstated, like the biological clock of, single women who were feminist at one point, but now want to have, families after ostensibly riding the cock carousel and things like that.
As the era of metamodernism now, which era postmodernism was deconstruction from any traditional norms and only fully materialistic. And New Age shit, of course. But metamodernism is this understanding of, well, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're at metamodernism yet. I still think
we're getting to it, I would say.
We're getting to it, yes. I do very much think, though, that we're still a postmodern society, and that
Absolutely.
If modernism was sort of this system, and I'm trying not to end up on the receiving end of another Dr. Layman video like a certain armored skeptic, but if modernism is sort of this trust in material institutions and these standards set by, people who were at one point perceived as authorities, if modernism was sort of this reliance on ethnos imbued upon institutions, then postmodernism is the complete stripping of ethnos from those institutions, and then the reliance on the pathos of the individual to some extent. And that's been an absolute wreck. And to some extent, the boomer still wants that. They still want there to be pathos. They still want there to be passion and love and this sort of material flourishing that they thought their pathos brought about, when in reality, it was much more than that. And so you see that in incarnations like AA, and that might explain why he's so emotional, in fact, because he's been, imbued in a society of material and spiritual pathos, and that's all he knows.
Can we take a look at the fathers and the mothers, the parents of the baby boomers, and see why, to understand why they are as they are,
Oh, yeah.
This is to say that they came from a time of the Great Depression, two world wars, and by the time they got to the 50s, when they started to get houses, they learned the lessons of their past, basically saying they want full refrigerators, lights, all material things, so they can be prepared to handle other recession or depression or some type of catastrophe. That's why you have these kids getting used to all these material things just being just there, like it's just second nature to them, while their parents knew the hardships of the Great Depression era, World War II, and among other things as well.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, Volt, because there was that survey done about, emotional attitudes of certain generations. And one of the things that was noted was that you have this, fetishization of work ethic and, the sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality amongst boomers. But that was very, very low amongst, the great generation, the generation that fought World War II. It was really, the boomers thought they were doing that themselves, but nobody who raised the boomers actually thought like that. And so the generation that supposedly did the most pulling themselves up by the bootstraps don't view it that way. And I think it's sort of a product of modernism to some extent, in that, their institutions were things like churches and things like the community pot and things like that, where they could all take from equally. It was very communal. And so the institutions, while, sort of taking the place of God, still had some element of religiosity to them. And so the great generation could get away with being much better Christians than, maybe they actually were, but they were still much better Christians in some sense than the boomers, who sort of fetishized, instead of the materiality of the institutions that brought them greater wealth, they think it's all them now. And so, whereas one hand, the people who raised the boomers were grateful to some institution for their material well-being, even though they should have been grateful to God, the boomer sort of abstracts that a step further and says, no, it's just me and myself that I have to thank for my own material well-being. These institutions were just a byproduct of me, the individual. And so it's sort of a natural progression, to your point.
If Rodin was here, he probably would bring up Christopher Lash's works, The Culture of Narcissism. It was written during the 70s, but can explain why we see such a very therapeutic, if not nostalgic society as of right now. It's just I think it just sort of goes over these social pathologies that we see within the baby boomers, even with our current culture, that it's mostly just springs, like our society started to shift from a more communal to something that's therapeutic and self-serving, due to the fact that like during the sex revolution, all that that we, how can I say this, that we the boomers thought they were pursuing creativity, but at the end of the day, they end up creating this condition that people need to insulate themselves from all types of criticisms that will break down their confidence, their self-confidence and will, like all that. I think that's sort of like the main thesis of Culture of Narcissism by Christopher Lash.
I haven't read any Lash yet. I'm sure much to Rodin's chagrin, but I do intend. I have one of his other books. I have The True and Only Heaven, which I intend to read in a little bit.
My understanding of Lash comes from Fukuyama's most recent book called Identity.
Get that book. What does Fukuyama say about Lash?
It's mostly concerning identity and his attempts to understand the political. It was just more so describing. He basically said it was just a promotion of self-worth, created this demand for a more therapeutic society. That self-esteem led to the culture of narcissism. Yeah, he briefly summarized that.
Okay. Well, I mean, if he's giving Lash credit, so be it. But, this is the natural progression of this sort of boomer. And I think, it sort of goes hand in hand with what the Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci said, and sort of his acolytes who... I'm not surprised you have that reaction. But one of the things he was right about, and his acolytes, Adorno, Horkheimer, and the School of Critical Theory over at Frankfurt, were very much right about, is that, liberal positivism would break down eventually, because people would sort of see through it. And it's not just a matter of seeing through institutions as sort of postmodernism is, or as postmodernism is in part. It's a seeing through of the moral standards and the practices of those institutions themselves, and breaking down sort of the metaphysic that they were brought up in simultaneously. It's a complete breakdown of everything. Like, there's a good Zizek quote where it's like, if you were to ask Michel Foucault, what is this? Is this a glass of water? Michel Foucault would say, I cannot answer that question. I can only tell you in what social context that question could have a meaningful answer. And so you see that, to Foucault, episteme, which was his big thing, is only the scene. And Foucault's big task was to try to get behind the scene itself. It's very Stirnerite in some sense as well, because, Well, I mean, it's Stirnerites to some extent.
I still find it completely hilarious how much postmodernist logic you use being a traditional Christian.
Well, look, I find deconstruction to some extent is useful in acquiring knowledge.
It's honestly dishonest. That's the issue I have.
No. The first, if you go back and read the 5 dialogues, the first Socratic dialogues that you hear are, what is good? It's the Euthyphro question.
Yeah, I know. Fuck Socrates as well, but
oh God, you fucking existentialists are such garbage.
No,
God,
but when it comes to deconstruction, it's just fucking awful because you can't claim any sort of metaphysical truth from your observation of reality because you are consciousness that can't make.
Well, no, you can deconstruct things to a certain extent if you try to deconstruct. No. See, at a certain point, it becomes dishonest because there are certain things you cannot deconstruct. You cannot deconstruct logos, which was Derrida's big project.
No, that's
like
not true.
Yes, no, you cannot. All right, we're not going to get into this now. But look, in my opinion, you cannot deconstruct logos. There are certain things. It's been called brute fact nowadays, which I think is maybe I'm conflating terms that don't actually belong together, but it sounds.
I know what you mean, but I strongly disagree with you.
Well, I think, to me, phrases like brute fact are really just sort of like atheist cope, to be completely honest. Because, like, if you were to, because I mean, the way I look at it, people say they mentioned it. The Non Sequitur show mentioned it on a stream at some point. There's some paper by the guy, like all philosophical systems either run into an issue of infinite regress, brute fact, or some kind of inconsistency. I forget what the third thing was. And to me, when I heard that, I immediately thought of, I forget the paper. I'd have to go back and watch the stream. But
Yeah, in a way, I do support. I know that he have created these barriers to not create deconstruction into deconstructing every aspect of reality, but in the same time, he has created in his logic enough to deconstruct the entirety of reality. Because of the existential problem, because of the consciousness problem.
It's only a problem if you're a filthy materialist. But look, all modern, postmodern, and philosophical problems of that.
Then you inherently lie because you can't make a claimant of God because you're not God.
That's stupid. That's stupid. You can make claims about things without knowing them perfectly or being.
Of course you can. No, you can't do that. Like you can make an assumption. You can make an assumption, which is in and of itself a claim, sure, but to claim that claim is 100% is a lie.
I don't think anybody. All right, we're not going to get into this now, but I don't think anybody's made 100% claim on anything in the terms of philosophy. I'm not making God. I'm claiming I'm 100% certain, but that doesn't mean it's actually 100% for sure, completely knowable. Like, I'm not claiming the universe is completely knowable. I'm just claiming I know enough to know there's a God. And I personally feel 100% satisfactory in that assumption, because it is an assumption. But
personally, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, personally, you're allowed to think whatever you fucking
want. Look, I'm not claiming we can know the universe perfectly. I'm just claiming I think I know it well enough to make this claim, and I will defend that claim.
But with that said, personally, you're allowed to believe that. But
not according to your system, I'm not.
No, you're allowed. Of course you are.
All right. We'll relitigate that another time.
You know what testimonialism is? It isn't you need to believe the right thing. It is you just testify. You just say, this is what I believe. And then, well, who cares? As long as you say what you believe and you say it as truthfully as possible, then it's fine.
All right. I will refer you to the clip on stream where you essentially said that, you kind of pussyfooted around it, but you said Christianity would essentially be illegal.
It wouldn't be. You think so because you think that preaching in the commons, in the public, should be allowed. Meaning saying, you should, I don't fucking know, castrate.
Well, yes, it should be allowed. But all right.
No,
see, this is what the boomer
allowed.
does. The boomer turns us against ourselves. And we see.
I don't turn you against anybody.
Well, no, you're not the boomer here. I'm talking about this conversation was meant to be about the boomers and the final solution to the boomer problem. But
yes, but we detract a lot. Let's talk about AA.
Well, hold on. There's one. Yes, we'll get back to AA. There's a few things in chat. I'll just address quick. Am I familiar with Dugin? And if so, what do you think about him? Dugin is cool. I think there's a lot of interesting thought there. I do think Duginism proper. It's a bit gay. I mean, obviously. I think Duginism proper is cooler than the shitty Nazbol meme, which is too much of a meme for my liking. But Duginism proper, I'm very interested in. I haven't read his book on the fourth position. But
it's interesting. I recommend it.
No, I plan on getting it at some point. I've seen Cultured Thug's synopsis of it, which is interesting. And it seems like it could be...
I have the book if you want it as a PDF form. Do you want it? I can give it to you.
I like physical copies of books, but maybe I don't know. Maybe you send me a few snippets later on. But I think Duginism has a lot going for it in the fact that it's a rejection of liberalism, but you could honestly package it for normies if you try hard enough. Like I see a lot of ways in which, as a Catholic, I could kind of co-opt the fourth position. Although, shut up. But there's a lot of other kinks in it, though. It seems like the simplifications of it aren't good enough because they seem somewhat contradictory on face value, while at the same time, when you try to be very nuanced about it, I feel like you lose a lot of the normie audience. And the same could be said of a lot of ideologies, but I don't know. I think there's a lot to it.
As an existentialist, I would say what I like about Dugin's idea is
that's the gayest way of starting a sentence ever. As an existentialist,
well, his Heideggerian thought of the Dasein. The Dasein, I do like. Only thing I like about Heidegger is the Dasein. I like a few things about him, but Heidegger also the big gay in many ways. But what he's trying to create in the fourth position is an understanding of the Dasein, the essence of oneself, to understand the essence of politics. And this is all esoteric, nonsensical shit, most of it, which is...
It is esoteric. I'm not sure how much of it is nonsense, but I mean...
it's a mixture. I mean, it's... In a way, he is creating the idea of metamodernism, which is an understanding of what went wrong, or understanding of oneself. But is it fully the understanding of the Dasein? Of course it ain't, because people are fucking sheep.
Well, I like the Z Fucks has a little bit of a comment on that, which is pre-modernity to modernity to post-modernity to pre-modernity again, based post-modern trad gang. Which I think is true, because I'm someone who kind of buys into Evola's conception of the Kali Yuga, and I happen to think, God, you just keep getting gayer, Pomen. But I think
stupid. Read Genon, you stupid twat. Read literally what he Evola has nothing original to him.
See, that doesn't matter though. Like, nothing's original; everything's derivative. But I think it's novel in its
actual teacher. Read the shit from his teacher, which is
Spangler?
Genon.
How do you spell that?
René Guénon. Read René Guénon. No one reads René Guénon because no one cares about him. But he literally, like Evola's... Okay, so René Guénon is a pessimist. He doesn't believe that the West can be saved. While Evola takes all the things from Guénon, because if you know about Guénon, you can just throw away Evola, because he stole so much. And
he also stole some things from Nietzsche.
What? Yeah, but that's because of his optimism. He believes he can save it.
See, if you're a pessimist, you're wrong, and I feel I'm safe in making that assumption. But
well, you don't like Spangler, you don't like Aki, you don't like those guys.
No, see, they're not pessimists though. I think that's a misreading of them, because like Evola takes just as much as them from what it sounds like from Guénon. But what I think is missing here is that everybody's underestimating the influence of Hegel in these things, because this is all a continuation of German idealism right here. And what you get is, you don't just get a simple cycle that ends once. You have a continuation of cycles of the dialectic constantly, of the absolute constantly getting to re-know itself. And so rather than having just one cycle and, oh, the absolute knows itself and, there's no more us, it keeps going because the absolute will never really get to fully know itself. And that's why I think Hegel works better with a dualist or hylomorphic metaphysic. But
that sounds pretty gay, dude.
Oh, shut up. Shut up. I didn't invite you on this stream to harass me, but no, but like, in all honesty though, I think very much Evola's conception of the Kali Yuga and the continuation of this cycle in terms of the man getting to know himself, his essence, getting to know God, getting to know Logos. I think it works well, and I think it meshes together very, very well. And I think
so. Why are we seeing the generation of the last man? Why are we living in their world now?
What do you mean?
We're not. But
are you sure about that? You never heard of the expression "the last man"?
No, I think I get what you mean, but like, it's never going to get there. Like, the thing about Yaki and Evola and Spengler, why I think they're being misread, is because everybody assumes that once this era ends, that's going to be it. But I think that's sort of a naive and, again, a somewhat narcissistic view. Like, people think capitalism is going to take us to the stars. I doubt that wholly. No, it won't. I don't think propertarianism will. I don't think Evolianism will. I don't think fascism or communism will. I think it's going to be a system that we can't even conceptualize at this moment as people living within this current frame. I think it's something so beyond our comprehension that it just hasn't even occurred to us yet. And so I think the reason
you follow the Biggay fourth positionist then.
I don't think that's fourth positionist though. See, what I view this as
literally like, okay, so what?
But fourth position is a
read
system.
his books. No, it ain't system. It ain't system. Read his book. So what Dugan tried to do, which was a big gay when he tried to do it. Don't think we're wrong, but he's tried to make up a system which. He claimed three positions, but he claimed that we can't even conceptualize the fourth position yet. It's beyond our reach. But once we understand everything of sorts of like
well, no, I don't think it's even a matter of I don't even think it's a matter of understanding everything, because again, we won't. I think what we're going to end up
not understand everything, but understanding what we did, meaning understanding certain one political idea of and material.
See, I don't even think it's that. I think because we're living in a time now where we can comprehend what the Egyptians did, but we still can't ever fully understand their system. Same with like the Sumerians or the Aztecs, because we're just not a part of that, origin, a part of that facet of history. And so the next facet of history, which we inevitably won't be a part of, will come up with something. Maybe it's not better, but it'll be completely different that we just don't get. And so when people read Yaki and Spengler and say, well, like, oh, this is going to be the end of like sort of the Indo-European man, or I know that's a bit LARPy, and not how they put it. But I think it's a sort of narcissism, because we see ourselves dying in those peoples. But really, humanity will continue. We will be a race that eventually, we will be a species, I should say, that eventually conquers the stars one way or the other. And just because we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean there isn't one.
I disagree. Homo sapiens will never conquer the universe.
See, that's gay pessimism talking right there.
I think that's a very rational view.
I do believe the creation we will create will conquer, either through technology or through genetics.
Gay transhumanism. Gay. See, Zizek runs on that same route. Really quickly, some more questions. Are boomers a CIA psyop? You could say the whole generation is sort of a CIA psyop, and I don't think that's technically inaccurate.
Oh my God.
Anyone else?
I mean, I want to get right into this all again. It's been good fun. We can do another stream. This is good fun. I love this kind of stuff. But let's get right into this. Ray, are you still there? Do you collapse with all the wine?
Oh no. Oh, should we mention that we're drinking on the stream?
Yeah, well, we're drinking.
All right. In the middle of this break, I am having Glenfiddich single malt Scotch whiskey, 18 years, very smooth. Very much enjoy it at the moment. I've taken a shot already, but that's it. Pomen, what wine are you drinking at the moment?
Well, two types of wines. I have a boxed wine of Cabisson, which I had that before. I took a nap. Now I have a Riesling wine. So it's Asla Lorraine wine. So it's
Where's it from?
Asla Lorraine.
Oh wow, sorry, I didn't hear you. Right. Oh, okay. It's a nice.
And there is Voltaire's face.
And there is Volt with his Canada Dry.
Soda pop.
Well, Volt is a youngin, I think, right? You're like younger than us, aren't you, Volt?
He's 18.
Yeah. All right, this is a book I wanted to get into.
All right. Well, if Ray recovers from her, what is that?
God and gold.
God.
Oh, that was the Spanish's. That was the Spanish thing. I very much admire the Spanish. They just didn't do a good enough job wiping out the pagans, in my opinion.
Okay, God and Gold is more so about the Anglo-American world and how much it pretty much is resistant and a better system than the French, the Spanish, the Germans, and pretty much why it surpassed and outlived all those systems, essentially.
I mean, I can understand that to some extent. Also, I'll just get back to the question.
Also, follow this guy on Twitter, Walter Westermead, a pretty cool guy.
Okay.
Another question in chat: who's cuter, Dugan or Zizek?
Zizek.
Yeah, I'll go with Zizek, but I'm biased, and everybody knows my bias.
Zizek is cuter. But,
yeah. The list puts him.
Dugan is more attractive.
Yeah. Dugan is more conventionally attractive. Zizek is cuter. Like Zizek, you can slap big anime eyes on, and he'd fit right in an anime. Dugan is trying too hard to be what's his name from Berserk. Crap, I can't think of his name. Somebody else asked me. Pomen is so Biggay he'd die as soon as he set foot in Iran. LMAO.
I'm probably gonna visit Iran.
It's a cool country. I wouldn't mind.
Well, the reason I would visit is mostly to talk to the Alatoya and the big honchos.
That'd be cool if you could. I mean, I don't know about your connection.
I could have in the past. I could have in the past, but I didn't take the course because we do travel every year into another country, and I didn't join the course during the Iranian trip. I could have, but didn't because I didn't know. And I could have met in some big guys. Yeah. All right.
Fourth Density asks, how do I not know about going on? I think I've heard his name mentioned in passing. I have only adjacently read Evola and Mosley and things like that. I haven't. I have to be honest. I'm somewhat disinterested in fascism, even of the esoteric variety of Evola and things like that. Because
it's not fascism. It has nothing to do with fascism. Genon has nothing to do with
fascism.
I
know he doesn't. But I mean, the esotericism sort of feeds into that. Like,
you mean traditionalism? He's the father of traditionalism.
Yeah, well, traditionalism in what context? Because I mean,
European non-Christian traditionalism.
Like, well, hold on now. Is he? So then, which would you say he's a neo-reactionary?
Nope.
See, then I don't think that does it. I'm more interested in, I'm not saying I want to return to the kingdoms and feudalism of old, but I'm also not. But I don't think you can.
I mean, do you know about Helena Blavatsky?
I don't think I've ever heard that name. No.
You're a big gay then. You're big gay.
I'm not going to be lectured by some Scandi bro about the big gay. All right. It'd be your own, son. But anyway.
So Helena Blavatsky is part of the. She started modern occultism. So this is the occultism away from masonry, Rosenkranzism, and
Occultism is the Biggay.
Well, Guénon literally took inspiration of that because Blavatsky is she took a lot of inspiration from Indian hierarchical systems, just like India.
Anything.
And
Oi.
Guénon then took that into creating that into traditionalism, and that inspired because Dugin is inspired by Guénon, because Dugin follows traditionalist school, which is created by Guénon. Evola is that, and many others which you are quoting, and that you don't even know the where they started from.
No, I get. Look, I understand and I appreciate traditionalism, and look, I don't know the whole anthropology of modern traditionalism. What I'm saying is, though, if you want real traditionalism, if you want real, authentic European culture-infused traditionalism, not just the traditionalism of the Orient, which I admit is still pretty based, but is not what I personally would prefer, and I don't think people of European descent ought to aspire to, then you should go back and you should study the medievalists. It is medievalist gang all the way. You can't even you can't even come close with that frickin' mystic BS.
Biggay.
Right.
Again, Guénon also is a perennial school of thought as well. Martin Linz was the one who kind of created it fully, which is that idea that, which is also a part of general anthropology, even though they don't say it because they're liars, which is perennialist school, which means that faith of sorts, people believe, comes from one source. So if you look at history, if you look at language, you look at how that comes from one source, comes from one God. What that God is exactly isn't unknowable.
Yeah, well, I mean, perennialism I have heard in passing. I'm looking at it. It seems like, it has cool. It seems like it could be based.
It's fascinating because, for example, Mormonism follows it, which is really fascinating, and other people follow it quite well. It's a part of modernism and postmodernism quite a lot.
God, I have the fucking prot in the chat now. I see you, Elmo. You've never read Guénon Gay. Listen, I got some more important things to be reading at the moment. All right, but anyway,
Biggay. Exactly, prayer culture's Biggay.
Listen, I'm not the one cucking himself out to Eastern mysticism. All right.
Neither am I. I'm Presbyterian. I don't care about this. But I know.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're even worse. You're a gay materialist. That's even worse than cucking yourself out to Eastern spiritualism.
I would call myself a naturalist, but sure.
All right. Like Hegel heretic. Don't eat. I'm gonna throw fists at Elmo. Hold on. I'm gonna take a shot and then. But anyway, we should get this back to the anti-boomerism, and maybe Ray can rejoin us. Ray, are you there?
I think Ray collapsed.
It couldn't be from the wine. Is Ray having wine? We didn't get Ray's drink. Hold on.
She'd be back when she's back. Okay, she'd be fine.
Oh, Elmo wants on, but I don't think I'm going to invite Elmo. I don't know. Should I invite Elmo?
No.
Invite him.
Well, see, I got 1 for and 1 against. We need Ray as the tiebreaker here. I'll democratize this decision.
You're not joining, Elmo. You're a nice guy. I'll give you a hug, but that's it.
Elmo, Pomen doesn't want you because you were an idiot on that one stream we went on together.
No. I like Elmo because I like Elmo, but you're not joining because we are 4 now. We shouldn't be more than 4.
That's fair enough. I mean, if Watts gets here, it might get a bit bigger.
I give Elmo a big hug. He's not big gay. He's big hetero, so it's good.
I don't know about that. He's a prot, so.
What? He's a Protestant?
He is, yes.
I give him a big hug. No, just kidding.
Yeah. I don't know. See, I've always enjoyed the fact that Zizek, even though he's an atheist, has always said he's a Christian atheist, and his favorite kind of Christianity is Calvinism, because it fundamentally plays into his sort of literally postmodern neo-Marxist perspective of the incompleteness of the universe, and building that. He literally is a neo-Marxist. Like, you can, like, the critical theory and the Frankfurt School, they are the neo-Marxists.
I know, but they're faggots.
They are. No, it is. But I still like
Biggay.
I still like reading Horkheimer, just because it's so good. Yes, Zizek also likes Chesterton, which also makes him based. But he reads Chesterton and he reads. What, you don't like Chesterton?
No, Biggay.
Oh God, you just keep getting worse. I don't even know if I'm gonna have you on a further stream.
I don't like Chesterton.
Yeah, why don't you like Chesterton? No, I'll articulate this a little bit.
Well, if we can see that morals stem from Christianity, and with the decline of Christianity, we can see a moral degeneracy. Like, no, we can't.
Yes, we absolutely can, and even Kurt conceded that point.
Yes, and that's because of ideas have changed, but it doesn't mean that we need a traditional Christian society.
All right, you keep living in that fantasy world.
Sure.
Elmo,
you needs God for everything.
You know how bad.
Elmo says to let him in and replace Pomen, and the more Pomen talks, the more I consider it.
Well, obviously, I don't agree with next to anything you say, Prague, usually. So
yeah,
we're on a different spectrum. You're like, I know metaphysics, and if you can't claim metaphysics using the PCO, which is a circle of fucking
it is. Oh God, we're not getting into this now because it's absolutely not. But question: Slavoj Žižek or Jordan Peterson, who is the better Christian atheist? I think Zero Books did a video on this, which I did. I watched Zero Books, and
I gotta pee. Beer back.
All right. Now I'll go kick him and invite Elmo. Just kidding. I don't know. Maybe I should kick. Maybe I should kick Ray and let Elmo in. I don't know, but
give her a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll give her a few more minutes. Like I figured she'd be listening too. But anyway, Slavoj Žižek. I think they're both bad. I think Žižek is more openly bad than Peterson about it, because I think Peterson's problem is he's essentially, he gets into a lot of Eastern mysticism too, unintentionally, because he is, through like 3 degrees of separation, essentially a Kodrianu acolyte, which I think is hysterical, because the fucking left is too dumb to pick up on this. But if you read Maps of Meaning, he literally, one of his citations, it's not Kodrianu himself, but it's one of the legionnaires from Kodrianu's Iron Legion. If you don't know who Corneliu Kodrianu is, he's a cool fascist author. He wrote For My Legionnaires, good book, would recommend. But see, so Peterson could potentially be a much better Christian atheist, but he's constantly pussyfooting around it because he's trying to appeal to the neoliberal machine. And so what he's constantly end up doing is he's using Christianity. He's using Christianity in a very proprietarian sense, I'd say. He's using Christianity to set up a system of laws and norms that are beneficial to the neoliberal or materialist world order. And I think that's I think that's very much what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, let's have Christianity without the religion. Let's have its traditions and its lack of moral degeneracy. Let's have secular. I mean, it kind of is.
No, we're following. Usually, like, the second name of proprietarianism is critical naturalism, which is a sort of an empiricistic view on morals. So, if a thing is beneficiary, reciprocal through society, which certain New Testamental norms are, so I got to give you credit on that one, then we should implement it. But if they are not reciprocal and they create an overall cost in society, we should remove them.
Yeah. See, well, you want the
I know it's a fucking bitch word.
You want the reciprocity. Yes. You want the reciprocity that, like, the old Christian kingdoms kind of had, and the ancient regime created. but you just don't want the God bothering aspect of it. You want a kind of secular Christendom.
No, I disagree. I mean, this is if we claim that everything comes from Christendom. I mean, in a way, I mean, depending on what theories you go after. If you go after more Schmithian theories, I would agree with you. But in a way, I do agree that it's Christian in a way, because everything is Christian in a way. But at the same time,
all right, we'll save it for another time.
Try to avoid definition issues. It's just semantic argument.
All right. Another question: is our boomers peak modernity or flailing post-modernity? See, I think flailing implies dying, when in reality, you know, if you look at the context and the criterion for what post-modernity sets up, Frederick Jameson has a book entitled Postmodernism, the Logic of Late Capitalism. And that's exactly what it is. Postmodernism is the logical conclusion of capitalism and is the exact sort of moral and theological and ontological outlook that people would have in late capitalism. And so I wouldn't say it's flailing postmodernity or that boomers are flailing postmodernity. I'd say they're the embodiment of postmodernity too. Like as Volt said, it's this kind of narcissism. Like even if you read Gramsci, not Gramsci, if you read if you read Horkheimer, because I have his book, Selected Essays in Critical Theory, his essay on, I forget the title, it's the second essay in the book. It goes into the fact that essentially you're left to create your own sort of moral reality and your own axioms based on what is supposed to achieve sort of a better universalism. And this is sort of the outlook Zizek takes on it too. And so that's what the boomers have been left to do. They've been left to their own devices, and they've given us this world, which is peak post-modernity. Like we, you know, the Gen Xers and the millennials are living through peak post-modernity as we speak. But the boomers are still the ones who best exemplify it. Because I think with Gen X and some millennials, you're starting to see the transfer into meta-modernity before we eventually arrive at pre-modernity again. As a sort of I know Pomen's not going to agree, but as a sort of addendum to the line that Z Fuchs sent out, it would go pre-modernity to modernity to post-modernity to meta-modernity and then back to pre-modernity. And if you want to know who I think is the best meta-modernist at the moment, I would point you to Beardson Beardley and Prince Hubris, who are the peak of meta-modernist humor, if you were to ask me. They would be, in any other timeline, considered avant-garde humor, absolutely. But one more question, and then we'll get back to exposing Der Boomer. And I might possibly kick Ray and invite Elmo in a little bit. But how do you solve the left cath problem, a.k.a. the boomer cath problem? Hopefully we get a based pope. I
do want you to get a based pope, honestly. That's the biggest issue you had in the fucking wild Catholics.
Yeah.
Where the fuck is the based pope at?
Yeah, the problem is we have a Jesuit who enables left cats and who enables boomerism because he's an Argentinian socialist, essentially. And so, you know, that's the problem with Francis is, you know, he's not based enough. I think if you get a based pope, that does a lot to disarming the left cats.
I mean,
because
look what Francis have done.
He's horrible.
Yeah, I remember he was in my city, by the way.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, immediately I say the next base pope, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's Cardinal Sarah. The next base pope will be black." Yeah, obviously, I want Cardinal Sarah. The fucking Wignats who make a big deal out of that are stupid. They're idiots.
Yes, idiots.
Wignats are idiots in general.
As long as the black man is a based black man, it really makes good
yeah, but like unironically based, not like.
But what exactly?
Well, like
what the funny thing about that is the progressives will can't say anything against it, regardless of what he does, because he's black.
Yeah, well, hold on. I actually there's a tweet from some guy who responded to Ray who I don't know if Ray doesn't come back on in, let's say, 3 minutes. I'll give her 4 minutes. But there's a tweet pulled up, and it's someone responding to Ray in a thread to Michael Tracy that I got involved in, because I don't know, Ray has weird opinions on Michael Tracy, and if she comes back, maybe she can explain them. But if not, it's some Wignat saying, or maybe he's not a Wignat, but he's essentially expressing Wignat sentiments in the form of a boomer. He's saying, so Ray's question, you don't need the whole thread. It really starts here, essentially. The Japanese are, Wignat, the Japanese are lucky to be alive after World War II. Give thanks to the white man and praise his generosity. Ray, the people who created Clown World say what? And I took umbrage with that tweet. I said that they, quote unquote, or they, parentheses, 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 are not white. But this guy instead responds by saying, the whole world had slavery, but white people stopped it. Who gave women rights first? The white man. Electricity, gravity, calculus, electromagnetism. I could go on, but is there any real need? And then he goes on to say, you may want to spend 5 minutes sitting in silence, thinking about what the white man has done for the world. You may want to compose a song, celebrate and contemplate your own way. Find a white person and thank them today. Oh my God, I didn't read that fully before, but now it's just hitting me.
Okay, let's bring that and remove all the junky and LARPy stuff. There's one thing that the white man has spread, and which is really important, that Thomas Sowell will constantly bring up in his books, is this idea of
Liberalism.
pretty much not liberalism, but freedom and human rights.
Liberalism.
And
so
yeah,
liberalism.
essentially. Yeah. But the thing is, it's sort of just this idea of the Declarations of Rights and Man has made its impact all over the world, like bringing certain regimes to forcibly ending their institution of slavery or their monarchies, just like this forced rapid liberalization through, ironically enough, through imperialism and conquest. And yeah, there's been tragedies during that time period, but the idea of freedom has definitely affected societies when Europeans and Americans have interfered in those regions of the world, such as Africa and the Asia, mostly in Asia. But hey, yes. Too bad. No, too bad. Too bad. Too bad he went LARPy with that. He went.
Yeah, well,
Too,
I think the freaking problem is that, Sowell's right. The white man has spread liberalism much to his own demise. But the bigger problem is more so, in my opinion, at least, that what we have is a situation in that the antithesis to liberalism always ends up. Hey, I'm Omnipotous or Omnipious or however the hell you say your name. What's up? The problem of liberalism and the Wignat response to it is that it always ends up affirming the system, because the way things are ordered, if you're not constantly shilling freedom and human rights, quote unquote, you're always going to end up only reaffirming the response of those people who want more of it, even if it is to their own detriment. And so the problem of this Wignat, or this boomer Wignat, who says things like, the whole world had slavery, but white people stopped it, yada, yada, yada. Electricity, we gave you electricity, gravity, all that shiz. It's all, it's all boomerisms. It's all just this way of trying to cope with the fact that we're in decline.
but have you read Charles Murray, Human Accomplishments?
I have not. I've meant to. And I know he has that big sort of like pentagram where it's like the majority of great human achievements achieved within this sort of like, pentagon of, between Italy and England and France and Germany and some of Eastern Europe and things like that. And so I know the idea behind it. But the problem with the response of this is that, it's a shallow materialistic interpretation for one. Two, it's not going to get the desired result. Like something like it's sort of a question of optics, but it's also sort of like these things aren't good. Like we shouldn't be proud that we gave women rights or that we invented electricity and all this, and we shouldn't be proud that we invented modernism and things like that.
Oof.
And
Oof.
well,
Hey,
I know
it's
you're
Ghost of
against it. Hey, what's up, Watts?
Hey, what's up?
Not much. We're kind of ragging on Boomer Wignats at the moment. Have you seen this tweet? Here, I'll post the link to it.
Wignats. What a curious combination.
There's more of them than you think. I think Wignatism is, the result of the more socially despondent boomer. So it's like you're not socially inept, you're not socially enabled enough to be a right-wing boomer and like go to the gun club, but you're also not enough of a pussy to subjugate yourself to leftist boomerism, and so you become a social outcast by becoming a Wignat boomer. All right,
Jared Taylor's kind of endearing.
Jared Taylor, I see. He's a self-aware boomer, though. He's a boomer who rejects boomer mentality, which is respectable. Okay, so there's the tweet. But see, I think you're just getting these different variations of boomerism that all extend from the same narcissism. Because Jordan Peterson isn't entirely wrong when he says that racial identitarianism is a kind of narcissism. My opinion on that is simply just, everything in moderation. And so, a moderate narcissism isn't necessarily the worst thing. Like I wouldn't, don't totally reject racial identity and pride in it, but also don't be this dude who is like talking about all the great materialist things the white man has done.
Being white is not a personality trait.
yeah, exactly. Being white is not a personality. All right, I think I'm gonna. If Ray wants to rejoin, she of course still has the link, but I'm going to eject her for the time being, just so it's down here. But
no, it's a sausage fest. Oh no.
So be it. If she wants on, she's of course welcome to come back. But I don't know. Have you listened to any of this, or are you just hopping on now?
Nah, I was with the boys.
Oh, that's nice. I'm gonna have to miss out on time with the boys because my family's going to Western Pennsylvania to celebrate Easter with other family.
So when I
go ahead, Watts.
No.
Nah.
So it was because you joined, because we're supposed to be shitting on AA. Do you have anything to shit on AA with?
Oh yeah, let's get back to that.
Oh yeah, AA. He accused me of all sorts of stuff just in the past week or so. He got me mixed up with Ghost of Buckley. So I responded. How did it start, Prague? Like he was like shitting on Prague. And he was like, "Oh, you did a stream with Ghost of Watts."
Yeah, well, yeah.
I was like, yeah, so what?
Because he posted a picture of my videos, and he pointed out how like I had an introduction where it used to be like featuring all these Austrian libertarian guys, and then it went from that, and then I talked about like reactionary stuff with Ray, or then I talked about stuff with Ray, and I had Volt and you on, and he's like, "Oh, you did a stream with him." And it's like, what's your beef with him? And he said, you invited someone else onto his stream one time, right?
It was that, and he also accused me of sneaking onto his stream, like under someone else's identity. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I've never talked to you in my life.
See, when Ray was here, she mentioned that AA outright lied about her stance on 9/11 to people on a stream at some point. So at first, I agree with you. This could be some sort of honest case of mistaken identity. But at the same time, he could also have that secret fear of you and just not want to debate you.
My karmic ties are too strong.
Yes. Well, it's funny. You should have been here. We were just discussing occultism and Eastern mysticism here before in reference to Evola. And obviously, for those of you who don't know, Alan Watts was a philosopher famous for, or most noted for, bringing Eastern philosophy to a Western audience. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's basically what he did. There were a lot of Easterners, mostly Japanese Zen Buddhists, who came over to America, but because Zen is so enigmatic, it was really hard to translate a lot of that stuff. And Alan Watts, as a native English speaker, did a really good job of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, question: what is your opinion on the Kali Yuga? Is it real? Have we repeated multiple cycles, or is the end of the Faustian man truly the end of it all?
I mean,
It's Biggay.
it's I mean, I guess it's an interesting way to view history, but I mean, a lot of it's just like old Hindus in the desert speculating about cycles. So it's an interesting filter to look into, but I don't think I would take it with a grain of salt. I don't think I'd take it like super seriously.
It's Biggay and stolen from his teacher.
All right. So they're giving me crap because I haven't read Guénon or whatever his name is.
Reganon. The guy has not read it.
Even Watts knows. Jesus Christ! I've been away from the reactionary reading circle for too long.
I think I recommended him to you. He's good.
You probably did. That's probably how I know of him.
The thing is, Genon. Evola. So majority of the thing from Genon because Genon was his main teacher. But the big difference again is optimism versus pessimism. Evola is optimistic. Genon is pessimistic. Extremely pessimistic. And the issue with Genon. Fuck me. The issue with Genon is it's really hard to follow him because he literally says everything will collapse.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, that's I think one reason I might not be into him personally is because I think pessimism is the big gay, and I think if you think everything is going to collapse, you're a quitter bitch.
I agree with you.
Well, see, you're an existentialist, so don't you buy into the whole cult of collapse thing too?
No, I actually don't. I'm a bit optimistic for that.
So what? Are you like a Kierkegaardian type existentialist where you think all this can be resolved, or?
So, can we bash Max Turner a little bit?
Who?
Just a little Max Turner.
Well, hold on. I mean, we could trying to relate it back to the thing. Do you think Max Stirner was a boomer before his time?
No.
Volt?
No. He's just when you deconstruct like every institution and philosophical tradition like he did,
he didn't deconstruct it. He just said it was pointless.
Well, he did. I mean, when I said deconstruct it, I mean critique it like in a very radical.
He didn't critique it either. The thing with Stirner and the difference between Stirner and Derrida is that Derrida tried to say that what we have to do is to critique the normative institution that exists to try to understand why, while Stirner was like missbruk. A little overdoing it with Stirner, but what Stirner said that we don't have to critique per se. We don't have to look at these institutions. We just have to understand that these institutions are messing with you, the ego, and you should just ignore them and become your own essence of sorts.
Elmo is saying, read Genon.
Read Genon, dude.
Read Genon.
God damn it! I'm outnumbered now.
Even if you don't necessarily buy into everything that he says, his metaphysics is extremely interesting.
Yeah,
I imagine
he has a way of.
It's
fascinating.
And by the way, pragmatic culture. I use Genon's argumentation against your metaphysics.
See, well, I don't think
that, and that's the claimant against how do you know. For example, you make a claim on reality, then he usually asks you, well, do you know a Mandarin? And then you say no, then you don't know. You need to make a claim fully metaphysical, and that you you make a claim of metaphysical truth, which is something that's above you, but you don't even know about other people's culture, like language, or like how other people have it in the earth that you are. So meaning that what you know as a human being is so completely minimum. It's so small.
It's enough to make reasonable assumptions,
Still,
though.
It ain't.
Oh, it absolutely is. See, this is gay pessimism. See, I'm looking. I Googled him a while ago, and I was going through his books and his whatchamacallit, his influences, and he has a very interesting set of people that it says he was influenced by, in the vein of obviously people I recognize: Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, Ibn Arabi, and then it also gets into a more interesting set. Influenced by Leibniz, that's not a huge shock, but then also Lao-Tzu, de Maistre, two people I don't know, Adi Shankara and Ivan Agheli. I don't know those people, but I guess.
No idea.
See, I'm worried here, though, that this guy is going to end up being a Gnostic, which.
Do you know what he converted to?
What did he convert to?
Islam.
Did he? That's interesting.
And most of thinkers, he converted to fucking Voltaire.
I think he got an echo volt.
Oh, sorry.
You bastard. So he converted to Islam. His view on that was right now, while I'm alive, I know that traditionalism works within Islam. We still have that, but I know that modernism is changing Islam to the worst. So, for example, the view that Wahhabism or Salafism, whatever you want to say it as, is modernistic is because of Ganon. He said that Wahhabism is the pinnacle point of modernism in Islamic thought, which I fully agree with him on. But he died before he could change his view all too much. But
yeah,
so he died as a Muslim. But then Martin Linz and some others, guy from Switzerland, which I can't pronounce his name,
I'm gonna
then converted to Sufism, because Sufism is the closest thing you can come to traditional thought.
Interesting. I mean, I imagine the Catholic Church was. I mean, it was better back then, but I can imagine why he wouldn't. But I'm just gonna.
He would call the Catholic Church to be gay.
I imagine he would, but he's the big gay because he's a pessimist. But I'm gonna just address some things in the chat that relate to sort of the Wignat we were discussing earlier, the Boomer Wignat. It always frustrates me when conservatives try to defend Western civilization by promoting how much more liberal it is than other cultures, and then go on to oppose greater liberalization. Yeah, no, that's the obvious Boomer contradiction. I think we'd all agree that it's incredibly exemplary in academic agent. Yes. Oh,
I mean, isn't he? He's not quite an ANCAP, but he's almost there. So I don't think bragging about how Western civilization is super liberal would really bother him.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, the point Ray made earlier is that a lot of the things that led to greater liberalization are things he should, in theory, oppose, like, free trade deals and stuff like that, even though they've actually led to greater liberalization. It's sort of that, internal contradiction of things.
Man, he is a Jew. He does this for money. He does this. Why?
Well, have I told you about the ghetto?
Which ghetto? There's many ghettos.
Oh, God. Then I have a story to tell you. So what AA did, he had a Discord server. Me and Joe is my closest ally, one can say, proprietarian. We joined Academic Agent's Discord server and we started LARPing a bit. Joe was like LARPing about, show feet, read siege, shit like that. So he got demoted to the ghetto or the slums. And AA did. Do you want to read the slums? The text channel, the slums. Mute your mic, Voltaire. Fuck me.
Oh, it's not that bad.
It still annoys the living shit out of me because it's Voltaire. But if you want to read the text channel, you have to give me £5.
Oh wow, that is really Jewy.
Yeah, and he made a video on his second channel about this.
God. All right. What's it? To address some more comments in chat. From Zeev Fuchs. Racialism is materialism. Actual ethnic identity is based on a group of people who see themselves as unique and coherent as a unique and coherent identity without sequencing their genomes, which is also true. I think it goes more towards what I would say is a hylomorphic conception of race, where it's not simply material, although the material aspect of it does play a part, but it's also, spiritual. There's, ethnos wasn't something that was simply racial, and it wasn't something simply defined by physical characteristics. It was defined by the spirit of the people themselves to create an identity. Like the ancient Greeks thought polis was its own metaphysical entity, like the metaphysical entity of the political cohesion. And so, ethnos has that same connotation too, which is why I think hylomorphism as a metaphysic works well. And also, in response to you, Pomen, Omnipius says, man has the capability to understand some things about external reality due to his intellect and having a rational soul. We cannot know all things, but certainly much, and which I think is
Okay, sure, fair enough. Use your rationalistic argument. I agree with certain rationalistic argumentation. I do believe they can know, but the issue with man is he claims to know real. I usually say this between the difference between man and woman. Woman works with ideas, which mean they don't ever claim a metaphysical truth, and they work with ideas and ideas. Men see an idea and then claim it's metaphysical truth. So even though it's not metaphysical truth, they still make a claim of it because man wants to know reality. So in a way, this is what it is, because you can rationalize yourself through a reality of sorts.
See,
you can in a way, but sometimes you can make the wrong rationalistic argumentation towards your metaphysical claims.
Yeah, no, you can make bad arguments and you can rationalize, but at some point, I don't think. At some point, again, there's rationalization, but what are you calling rationalization, and what actually separates it from a good rational argument? And at that point, are you sort of being dishonest in the same way postmodernists are dishonest with their deconstruction on some level? Oh, did I cut out there?
No, you didn't. So you asked me where I draw my line, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Well, that's a next to impossible question to ask. Usually, it's what is observable. Is what I would say with that.
Yeah, all right. See, I'd say that's insufficient right there, but well,
that's again. Now we're just drawing lines and kind of irrelevant discussion to
have. See, but I don't know. You can draw lines based on reasonable things. Like, it's sort of like, there are philosophies where you can deny the axiom of you can deny the principle of non-contradiction. But of course, there's that great Muslim scholar with that great quote. I will beat the man who denies the law of non-contradiction until he admits that being beaten is not the same as not being beaten. So, you can draw lines based on reasonable information gathering of reality.
Yeah, but it just goes down to you can make a claim of, which means you can make a testimony of, which is fine enough in a way. But again, how can I trust a man who never read Ganon?
I gotta read
That's a
Ganon.
fair point. I mean,
shut up! God damn it, Watts.
But I'll throw in my 2 cents. I think that all legitimate or useful or whatever knowledge of reality is based on experience, and then you build up from there. You build up with abstractions, although abstractions have the possibility of being wrong, because in order to abstract reality, you necessarily have to simplify it quite a bit on some level, no matter how nuanced you're being.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this fair enough, and I don't disagree with that. And I would dare say Aristotle or someone wouldn't disagree with that. But just one more question, then we'll get back to shitting on boomers. It's asking me about the comment I made about accelerationism. If you want to understand my views on accelerationism, I'd refer you to the stream I did with Omnipius about Yang Gang and things. Also, somebody else said, you really think electricity was a bad thing? Yes, the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. And that's all I'll say about that. So, Watts, was there anything else you wanted to kind of mention about AA? Because I assume you've sort of known of him prior to this and might just have opinions on him as well.
Yeah, he's been on my radar for a while. I watched the stream, watched a couple streams of him debating socialists. He debated Mook and Bad Mouse a while ago with Sargon.
Mm-hmm.
That was awful to watch. Yeah, I don't know. He's a dumb boomer who is either really gullible and stupid or really malicious or a horrific mix of both. That's pretty much it. I think it's probably both, honestly, because I'm looking back at the tweet history of that interaction that we had, and I think he just legitimately was being stupid. Because I don't think he have any motivation to lie about me, because we didn't have any beef prior to this.
Yeah, well,
but we do now.
I mean, you do now. I'll DM you something on Discord, and you tell me if you want to bring it up or not. But I think there's always secret there's always secret motives, I think, to things like this. I think in AA's case, that it is somewhat money, and I do think it's also prestige, because I think he thinks he has an image that he needs to maintain, to his audience, whatever that image is.
He's quick to dissociate with people, like publicly. So that could be a part of that.
Yeah, he really feels that desire. It's sort of that really high, to put it in like terms that Jonathan Haidt might use, he has that really high moral outrage, moral disgust kind of pillar. And it's weird for I mean, it's not entirely weird for someone of his social leanings to have that, but it's weird that he would apply it to people. I mean, maybe it's not.
Is he socially conservative? I thought he was a hardcore libertarian.
He's come around to social conservatism because he's seen some of the empirical data on what, single mother households have caused and things like that. Like, he's kind of, at the heart of it, he's an Anglo-empiricist, which is one of the things I constantly shat on him for.
He came once to say that he loves Stalin because he persecuted the gays. I remember that.
Who thinks that?
AA. That was on his second account that got suspended.
Whoa, what is it about John McCain now? John, wait, Alamo, what did you just say? Repeat what you said.
Didn't hear that?
No, I heard it. I just didn't get it because you speak like friggin' Speedy Gonzalez.
Yeah. No, I said that AA once said that he praised Stalin over persecuting the gays.
Oh yeah, okay. So he's based Red-Brown Alliance, then, is he?
Yeah, I was gonna say, never mind. He's based in Red Pilled. Yeah,
I have to ask. You seem to have put some interesting little emojis in your name recently. What's going on, big guy?
That's mostly just shit posty. And I've just been reading more into Marxism lately. Just out of care, just to read it, because it's good to read stuff if you're gonna argue with people about it. I read about it a while ago. I'm sorry, what?
You don't like global homo?
I don't like global anything.
Fair enough.
Also pragmatic. I took your advice on how to be more based on natural theology, so I decided to rewatch all the episodes of Supernatural.
Oh, great.
Great.
That show is a fucking Gnostic fan fiction, and it's I hate it. United States of Greater Austria when? Hopefully soon. But I don't know. What else do we have to say about Der Boomer? Well, I have a greater. This will be a good sort of final conversation to cap off the stream. What is the solution to the boomer problem?
We exterminate
Wait for them to
first,
die.
then?
They're gonna die soon. Just wait it out.
I don't know, man. Modern medical technology has made me worry about that.
Modern technologies may be worried because it might make boomers last longer.
Exactly.
Well,
I say that as I have, aunts and uncles who are boomers, and of course I love them, and they're the good ones. I don't want
It's a
them
necessary sacrifice.
perhaps. Look, I've always said that if aliens came to this planet, or not aliens, but if angels came to this planet and said something like, "Oh yeah, we're going to purify the human race," and it turns out the new Garden of Eden is actually going to be on Earth, but we just have to cleanse all the impure, and they were like, "Up, you got to go." I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm down for that," but I'm unwilling to sacrifice, my aunts and my uncles, whatnot. That might be a step too far.
well, let's see. What's the
You're just
best?
a pussy. That's what you are.
Yeah.
Shut up, Elmo. No one cares.
What's the
I
best
mean-
to deal with the boomer problem?
Personally, for me, it's as simple as taking away their entitlements, honestly, and reinvesting that in younger generations. So rather than having our tax money being paid for having to pay for the retirement of old people who aren't producing anything, you instead pay it forward, and so that the retirement funds of the boomers that they should have saved on their own because they're so busy pulling themselves up by their bootstraps are then used to fund, the education and the betterment of the next generation.
Okay. Well, okay. And the younger generation, our generation, right?
I mean,
Well,
our generation, the generations after us, so forth and so on.
Yeah, but our generation are a product of a therapeutic and increasingly becoming more tolerant, forced tolerance through all these stupid cartoons like Steven Universe, and
God.
it just seems like they're becoming more, I don't know, not really aware, they're just kind of lost in the world with no real inherent meaning as they're being told over and over again.
Yeah, see, but we're like that, at least in part because of the boomers and so forth, because they led us to believe that we can pursue a dream that literally only existed for them as a fragment of a certain period of time. And so part of that disenfranchisement has to at least fall on their feet to some extent.
I would like to say that you had to get rid of white people first before the boomers. Because the
All
other
right,
day I was.
No
Well,
one cares you prot Mexican.
I'm just saying that you had to get rid of them because the other day I was watching that video about that kid in drag saying how he loves drag, and I'm like, yeah, white people deserve to die. I came to that conclusion because like a lot of these things were brought up by white people.
I ain't gonna lie, it be our own, and I'll take responsibility for that. However, it's not entirely our own. I'm gonna do some shielding here for a moment, and just say that it can't be. Yeah, we have some traitors because this would have never happened if white people were left to their own devices.
Prag,
But
you're not a white guy. You're a Catholic. Remember that.
Oi, I'm a Catholic white. There's many of us. Go to the country of Italy and Spain
White is
and
the
Portugal.
consumer brand like NASCAR dads. Come on,
Italians
just
being white.
Hey, all right, look. I consider. Well, I know if Rodin were here, he would absolutely disagree with this. But Italians are absolutely white. Sicilians, on the other hand, that's a different question. But in all seriousness,
Haven't you seen Nick Juante's tweet? Where he says he's 50% Italian, but he's not white.
I don't know if you're taking. I don't know if you're serious about that or not.
I'm fully serious. He literally said that.
Well, I think he's. Well, I think he's. I know he literally said it. I'm just like, are you taking it serious? Because I feel like that stuff is just a joke.
I'm not white nationalist when I'm not. How can I be white nationalist when I'm not even white? 50% Italian, 25% Mexican, 25% Irish, 2% Black African.
Well,
Where exactly is the whites?
well, you don't have to be a white to be a white nationalist.
That's
To be
true.
frank.
As we all know,
That's
Identity
true.
Europa was a Latinx movement.
I was called I remember a couple of months ago I was talking to someone about immigration and something like that, and the person called me the white nationalist, even though I'm pretty much brown and Puerto Rican and all
Hold
that
on.
stuff.
To get back to the question. So, Elmo, your solution to the boomer problem is simply get rid of whites, and the boomer problem will solve itself.
I mean, yeah, because boomers. I mean, if you disregard stuff like technological advancement and also scientific advancement and all that, the boomers will die out pretty much out of old age and other stuff. The ideology will die out with it, I guess. I mean, I don't think that ideas are pretty much can stay. Some ideas cannot stay like that for generations, depending on how useful they can be or something like that. So yeah.
That's fair enough. I mean, my deal with it though is that if the system that they set up stays in place, you're always set to get more boomers. And I don't think any one particular racial category is immune to it in particular.
True.
So I think it involves in taking their entitlements away, and it involves.
Well, the other reason why I say that white people kind of also enable it because they are the majority. Also, you
Yeah,
take
we
in a
need to
large.
grow a spine.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say this about the boomer problem. First of all, it's like, I don't know, boomers a mindset, I think. So I don't think when boomers go, they're not really going to go. Their karmic bonds tie them to the material plane, and they'll just there's all sorts of younger boomers. Second of all, I'm going to be old someday. So I don't necessarily want to set the precedent on a legal level of fuck old people, they could just die. Because the whole point of having or a big portion of having a family and all that in the community is so that when you're not able to produce things, you will be taken care of. So there's that incentive to make sure that happens to me when I'm old.
No, look, I wouldn't sit here and tell you that that's something to not want. But what I'd say is what that sentiment has morphed into is the sentiment that the youth should prop up the old at the expense of the youth. And so because of that, I would say there needs to be a massive correction in the other direction. Because I mean, one
I
way
think
or
that's fair.
yeah, I mean, like one way or the other, we're all eating the short end of the apocalyptic stick real soon. My prediction has been for the longest time, and this is before I even got political. Like I've had 3 theories about the apocalypse and how it will happen. It'll either happen. Well, my first theory is kind of garbage. Well, I still got 10 more years. My first theory is that it's going to happen sometime in my 20s, so within the next decade or so, because I'm 21 right now. It's going to happen when we're like 80 or 90, so like 60, 70 years off from now, caused by just natural things. Or I'm going to somehow manage to wriggle my way into power, and I'm going to cause it in the name of bringing about the imperium of man, and essentially just creating my own unification wars.
One of those is not like the other.
One of those is not like the other, but it's the best option. That's the thing.
One perspective that I always kind of had, being a Christian in itself, is that we all have original sin, and obviously man has been fallen since the beginning. So obviously things are never going to get better. To say, the most I can see is just an alleviation of the suffering on the way. But yeah, that's as much more positive I can get. I'm not saying that we are doomed completely, but yeah, I think that the next we're just at some form of Rome point 2.1 or something like that. I think a bit more different than that, but yeah. I don't know what else I get. I was talking to this with someone of my life group today, and yeah, pretty much at the end of the conversation, he just thought that I was a pessimist or something like that.
I think I think we need I think we need some type of catharsis. This generation has not faced, say, some type of tragic unifying event, and we sort of just need this cathartic, very spiritual moment that this generation can draw upon as some type of grander historical memory or narrative. Just
We need to get rid of all
I
the
think
moderns.
that's sort of like one of the problems with this modern world, so to speak. But is the future bleak because the future bleak, or is there optimism for the future? I say, if you're a Christian, you believe anyway things will get better over time. That you kind of view a thing as a almost like a self-healing process, to no, to almost overcome yourself, overcome your original sin. It's just, I think, I think things will eventually get better. We're just in a tiny recession in a grander historical scheme,
Things do get better, but in heaven.
I mean, yeah, but I also believe that, I think, we grow up in a society that's taken our the way things are for granted because we're so materially well off. And I do think things will get better, just not in the way we anticipate them. Like, I think if we return to pre-modernity, if we return to a medieval mindset, not because we consciously choose to, but because circumstances force us to, it will be better, not materially, but spiritually. And
there's no going back, though.
There's no going back consciously, but I don't know. If the forces of history will it, then perhaps there's going back of some kind.
Yeah, it will be more just a resemblance of pre-modern sort of thought, but it won't be pre-modern thought in itself.
Well, no, I mean, Elmo, you heard me before, even though you weren't on. I think the new system is going to be something we can't even possibly comprehend at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's pretty much at this point the end of history to say, which we're watching right now.
Yeah, well, see, I don't think it's the end of history. I just think it's the end of our history, I think it speaks to somewhat of a cultural narcissism that we view the end of our history as the end of history. It's sort of like when Zizek says, when it's easier for us to envision the end of the world than the end of capitalism. It's sort of that kind of narcissism, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, have you read The End of History and The Last Man by Yoshihiro Francis Fukuyama?
Well, no, because Fukuyama is the big gay.
Indeed,
he's not.
Correct. No, he is absolutely the big gay vault.
Are we going to talk about something interesting, or I'm going to leave otherwise?
All right, yeah, well, I think we're going to finish up here. Wait, Pomen, before you go, I did have one question.
Yeah.
Who is the dude in the picture of AA's, profile? Because I'm working on the thumbnail for this video right now.
It's an actor. I don't know his name fully.
Yeah, he plays the tiger in Jungle Book, the original one, the 60s one.
Oh, you're right. Shere Khan from Jungle Book. You're right. I have to look up his name. I'll look up his name because I'm working on the thumbnail, and I think you guys will like it.
Dang, I wish we would talk about The Last Man a little bit. Fun topic, Nietzsche. Definitely interesting.
Oh, George Sanders. That's it, George Sanders. But I don't know. See, The Last Man to me is again, that's sort of a narcissism. There isn't going to be a last man. There's going to be a last. First off, I don't think there's going to be a last man because I don't see.
No. That's not what The Last Man means.
What does The Last Man mean?
The Last Man means that we're basically content with this world, and we're just content with this consumption, this neoliberal capitalism, that we are just basically consumer units in a big mall, essentially, that these are the last men.
Excuse me.
we are living in the generation of the last man. Basically, as Pomen put it earlier, they're sheep. They're awful. They're
there's
terrible.
definitely never going to be a last man like that, because we as humans are horribly ungrateful things that will never be satisfied, no matter how good we might have it.
No, it's already happening. It's just endless consumptions.
See, you think it's happening now, but simultaneously, the seeds for the undoing of this system have already been planted, and so it's only a matter of time. I'll just read some comments and get some quick thoughts on people before we wrap up. I'm the Pious again. The strange goat. We need to smash cultural boomerism first. Well, I think you smash cultural boomerism by taking away the financial incentives to be a cultural boomer, for one. But I agree. You need to destroy the boomer mindset before you can. Again, it's not even the boomers themselves. It's not the people. It's the mindset. There can be boomers that don't endorse boomerism. So that's true, but you need to take the financial incentives away. And then you take away even the tacit incentive to endorse the boomer mindset. On the Pious, you cannot, metaphysics, you cannot look through a metaphysical perspective without divine law and revelation. Also, humans can generalize, which requires unobserved abstraction and conception, which I think that's more directed at Pomen, but I don't know. What? I think the line from Omnipious in the chat, Zeev Fuchs, make Florida the official boomer ghetto. See, that's a situation which I think would work for everybody, because I think they'd love it, and I think we'd all love it too.
Mm-hmm. Just got to put them there before there's a really nasty hurricane. And Florida's going to sink.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to be purposefully mean, but they'll have to
sacrifice.
They'll have to deal with it. That's all I'm going to say about it. All right.
Good story. Not enough of AA bashing. I want more AA bashing.
Well, I don't know, Pomen. You want to leave us with some final words then? Because, see, we've all, my experience with AA, he invited me on twice for a stream. One stream he ended up deleting. The other stream I was, kind of barely commenting on.
Well, I challenge AA to invite me to talk about.
Screw that noise. I want him to invite me. I want my dopamine, goddammit.
Well, you Biggay, because you don't know, you don't read.
Don't even talk to me, materialist. Don't even.
That's fair. You would know he's not a materialist if you read Ganon.
Fucking no. But
Ganon,
he doesn't even.
Dude.
But it's not even a matter of him agreeing with Ganon. It's a matter of all the other garbage he believes. He's a freaking existentialist.
He's an egoist, an existentialist, and a proprietarian, and a what?
Stoic.
Oh. Damn.
Yeah, Volt, what are you? What ideology are you, so we can properly taunt you for it?
Pragmatist.
I feel like my culture is being appropriated here.
No, I'm mostly a political pragmatist.
All right, no, I get what you mean there. It's funny, when I first came up with this name, I mean, people can call me Joe if they want. They don't have to call me Prag or Pragmatic or whatever. But
Joe?
Yes. Joe? I am Joe. People know that before. People know that because I used to talk with this other guy who's also on Dylan's server, but kind of, I don't know, we haven't spoken in a bit. He was the Pakistani reactionary. He was a cool guy, and he recognized we knew each other from that godforsaken app that I refuse to name unless someone else names it. But
funny.
What?
I'm funny.
Yes, that place. But yeah, I knew him from there, and then we both happened to run into Dylan at the same time. But he was far more politically literate than I was, and so he was cooler than I was. But we'd both occasionally call into Chris Cantwell. And so, we spoke a few times. I'd love to have a conversation with him, but he's out doing IRL shit, receiving passive income for owning a business and shit. So, he's making it bank. He's making bank and planning on becoming the next dictator of Pakistan while, I'm here doing this.
He got suspended from Twitter not so long ago.
He did. He's been suspended for a while, and I don't think he's come back. But he told me a while ago that he's been leaving the internet political scene, except for yeah, I think he's still a part of the proprietarian Discord. Maybe Pomen, maybe you can verify this. The Pakistani reactionary.
No, it's not in there.
No? All right. Well, then maybe he's become more reclusive than I thought, in which case, good for him. Credit to anyone who can leave the internet. But what else is there? We've discussed the final solution to the boomer problem, and I think we've all agreed that just shoving them in Florida and taking away their benefits is the way to go.
And we also agreed that you have to read Ganon.
Yes, and we've also agreed that I have to read Ganon, or else you Spurgs won't stop badgering me about it.
Oh, we are the
study of
Spurgs.
Hinduism.
What?
Introduction to the study of Hinduism. Start with that.
And also Crisis of the Modern World. Crisis of the Modern World goes also into introduction to traditionalist sort of large T traditionalist thought and all that.
Crisis of the Modern World is really the only one that's like distinctly political. The rest of them are about metaphysics and symbolism.
Yeah, like I'm reading them. It's like, there's introduction to the study of Hindu doctrines, man and his becoming according to the Vedanta, the multiple states of the being, the symbol of the cross, the reign of quantity and the signs of the times. This shit sounds interesting. I'm not gonna lie.
If I remember correctly, he believed that mathematics and calculus can be used as like a metaphysical discipline. So
I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily. I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily. I'd be interested to see in how he means it, but because obviously I'm big on using like mathematical analogy for metaphysical comparison and things like that.
It's very interesting that a lot of his writings, he has a lot of writings on Hinduism, but he ended up being a Muslim, even though he started out as a Catholic.
Yeah, well, a lot of France was once upon a time the first daughter of the church. Now it's kind of like that first poor daughter.
Being a Muslim has not much to do about Islam. It has to do with that following the traditional idea of Islam. He joined an Egyptian Sunni cult of sorts.
If I remember correctly, he Crisis of the Modern World. He said something of that Eastern philosophy and thought was true traditionalism as compared to Western thought. And he said that Eastern kind of resisted almost everything that Western the West sort of submitted itself to.
Yes. I mean, you can see it as because Ganon also stole a lot from Helena Blavatsky. So if you take Helena Blavatsky's views on a sort of Hinduistic hierarchy system, you can understand Ganon because he is an occultist after all.
Yeah, I'll take that into consideration when I get back into reading like Ganon, Evola, and Spengler.
Always read the main source, which is Helena Blavatsky on the cultist Hinduistic ideas of hierarchical systems, and then you read Ganon, and then you throw Evola in the trash can because it's kind of shit, and then you continue that way.
Okay.
Does AA support UKIP? Do we know this?
I guarantee you he does. I'd be shocked if he didn't, because Sargon supports UKIP, and he's Sargon's lapdog, so...
It is true. That's another thing. Sargon as well is peak boomer, but I don't know. Did you guys catch any of that debate on Twitch with Fuentes, Sargon, Destiny, and Hassan Piker?
I saw it. I saw some of it. It was pretty funny. I think it was pretty clear, even from just the bits that I watched, that Sargon and Nick were just dominating the debate.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got too. But for the most part, it seemed like Nick was doing most of the work and Sargon was kind of like, he contributed every now and again, but it seemed like he was along for the ride most of the time.
Yeah.
We should talk about this another time, probably.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just people are calling Sargon redemption arc, and I think that's preemptive is all.
It's very preemptive, yes.
Hassan
a
is room
redemption arc,
temperature
then it's very
IQ.
slow.
Yes. I'm sorry. What was that, Watts?
I said if it's a redemption arc, it's a very slow one that he's been on since like 2014. Very slowly, more right wing, kind of, but very slowly. If we wait another 40 years, he might register as Republican.
I mean, I don't want him in the United States, period.
Yeah, and Hassan is a retarded idiot.
Yeah, no, someone, who's it? Avant-garde student said Hassan is room temperature IQ. Easily. I think even that's being charitable. Literally the result of nepotism, yeah. And fucking, I guarantee you, I could absolutely bitch slap him on Marxism, because not only have I probably read more theory than him, I've read more Hegel than him, almost assuredly. And if you want to go the route of
Hegel isn't fully relevant, but somewhat irrelevant.
I mean, it does kind of.
Yeah, but Marxism is a bastardized version of Hegel.
It is, but if you're gonna go on the, the sort of the claim that you're the true inheritors of the Hegelian system, then whatchamacallit, then I'm going to call you on that bullshit because you absolutely rendered Hegel's dialectic utterly useless by completely inverting the metaphysic. And that is the biggest sin I think Marxists have not been required to reckon with. To me, like, the dialectic does not work when you're using it in a materialist framework. It has to be either idealist, or I think it can work in a dualistic sense as well. But
yeah, I know he's very idealistic. Again, clerical fascism is the synthesis in his eyes. So,
all right, I'm gonna.
all history will lead to clerical fascism.
Fascism is modernism and therefore gay.
No, but clerical fascism isn't the same as fascism.
I mean, it isn't, but it's still kind of modernism. It's still like trying to wear traditions.
No, it ain't, because the idea of fascism, the description of fascism, is an idea above all, which is like the idea of the state, or with clerical fascism, it's the religion above all.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a better idea above all, but it's still, I don't know.
That's what
there's a more synthetic integration of state and religion than, like, obviously separation of church and state is stupid, but I think there's a more synthetic integration of faith and the life of the polis than what fascism has to offer.
Kill baby penises. No. Well, I think we should end it here. I'm way too drunk as well.
All right. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen? And I'll also ask for any closing questions from chat.
Fuck AA.
Fuck AA.
Fuck AA.
Read Ganon.
Fuck AA. Read Ganon. That's a great synthesis of this. All right. With that,
we can overcome this.
That's a good note to end on. All right, I like that. Volt ending it on a positive note here. We can overcome this, guys.
I disagree with Volt.
God damn it! Nobody asked you, Prod.
I think he's Biggay.
Yeah.
God damn it! Couldn't leave well enough alone. All right.
We can overcome this. We can overcome this system that
all
the
right.
baby.
We do have one question. So what did AA do? He's just a boomer who like blocks people really easily and is easily triggered. So yeah.
He big gay.
He big gay. That's what we'll end on. We'll all agree that AA big gay.
AA is big gay.
AA big gay. I'm gonna make that I'm gonna edit the title after this. All right. Good night, everybody.